Hello and welcome to another episode of the Uncommon Energy Podcast. On this week's episode, we'll be chatting about the results from the European International Championships, which just took place this past weekend. We will, of course, have Guess That Flavor Text, everyone's favorite segment of the podcast. And then we'll be chatting about a little bit of an interesting situation that popped up that came to light, some stolen cards from the Pokemon Card Factory being discovered, being recovered by the Pokemon Company, of potentially affecting pull rates. That's at least what people seem to think. We'll talk about all that and more on this week's episode. My name is Chip Ritchie. I'm joined here, as always, by my friend and co-host, Azul GG. What's up, Azul? How we doing, man? How was London?
What's up, Chip? Doing good. Nice to play another IC. Yeah, I was in London. London was okay. I've been there quite a few times now, so I've already done some of the things. And then, of course, as always, the food was extremely mid. So
Did anyone? All
there's
right. So last week you pled to the comments to help you find something to eat. Did anyone in the comments help you find something good to eat?
a couple suggestions. I believe I went to one of the places, but it wasn't like anything, next level. Yeah. So still, there's only one place in London that I would go back to. Still, it's a place that I did go back to. It's like a van or like a bus by the convention center. They have like pizza. That place is pretty good. But besides that, I still have yet to go to another place where I would like return to. And I do go to places. So someone put this in the comment section last week. They must have not listened to me when I was talking last week. I've been to many places outside of just the convention center area, more towards like the downtown areas, stuff like that. So, but still, yeah, I mean, and you see, it's not just me. You see everyone talking about it on Twitter. The food in London is just extremely mid. Not not Europe in total, but just London. Probably the UK in general. The food's just mid. That's fine though. The city's pretty cool. Still pretty nice. I like the weather. That it was rainy, kind of overcast, cool. So the weather was nice. It was nice. It wasn't like that much warmer in California, but it's still I enjoy that kind of weather. It's like shorts weather for me. So enjoyed the weather. The weather was nice. The venue was huge. It was a little bit warm in the venue, so that was kind of unfortunate. But it wasn't like bad. Plenty of play space, huge venue, tons of play area. They they messed up on the table numbers. Pretty like it felt like it was pretty bad. They like how they usually run it like lengthwise. Like if you have a length of 10 tables in a row, it'll be table one on the far right, and then it'll be it'll go down all the way to the 10th table.
Hmm.
But their table setup, it was instead of going long ways for the table numbers, it was like the short way for the table numbers. So it like zigzagged.
So it was
It
like
was just
table one was sitting next to like table like 15 or something.
kind of, yeah, like it would go stretch down and then on the rebound it would reset. It was bad. It was
So it
bad. It
was
was
like
hard to
table one, two, three, four were all the tables on the aisle. Is that what you're saying?
no, it's harder to explain than that, I guess. But it was like basically I never thought that I never considered that there was a way to mess up table numbers until EUIC because every other regional and IC I've ever been to, even previous EUICs, the table numbers were all done the same way and it just felt fine. But going to EUIC this time around, there apparently is a way to mess up table numbers, and they did it. So I'm sure it's something they'll fix in the future. Whoever did the table numbers this time around will not be doing them the same way again because it I never thought you could mess it up. I didn't think it was possible, but it definitely was. But yeah, I made day two, played the Sablezard. Had an okay day one, went in at 612, which is nice to have that extra point over just going in at 621. And then yeah, day two didn't go super well. Started off with a win, but it kind of went downhill from there. But how was I did you tune into the stream at all, Chip, throughout the weekend?
Yeah, I watched it a decent bit. So like round one starts at 4 a.m. So I didn't like get up and watch round one or anything like that.
Yeah.
But when I got up, I started watching. So and I had it on pretty much in the background all day. So I would be sitting down and actually watching a few rounds, and then other rounds would just kind of on in the background or on my phone while I was getting other things done, doing other stuff. But yeah, I tuned in, watched a good bit of it. We got to see some pretty interesting decks. It seemed like I think they did a pretty good job overall picking the matches and stuff like that. So shout outs to all the casters. Everyone did a great job. Um, and yeah, it was a blast to watch. Get to enjoy the stream a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit more about like the finals and stuff. But did you watch the finals at the venue, Azul, or did you
No,
watch
I
it at all? Really?
left.
Okay.
No, I watched a little bit. I actually thought Tord was gonna win.
I
Because
did too.
as I was getting onto my flight, game 3 was,
Yep.
started, and I was like, "Well, this looks terrible for,
Yep. Yep.
Alex here." But, but
I
yeah,
think
it
it's
did
one of
not,
the
end up
better
going that way.
I think it's one of the better finals from a major in, like, recent memory, for
Yeah.
sure. It was a really good set. Just, all 3 games, honestly. Like, I think it really kind of dictated how the matchup can go.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, it does feel close, like, either player can definitely win. Alex maybe has a slight edge with the Vulpix and stuff, right? But, I mean, he didn't have it in game 3, found a way to win still, so it was pretty
Yeah.
wild.
I definitely plan on going back and, like, rewatching it all. I'm gonna do, like, the VOD review of, UIC. Now that we have, like, a new format, it feels worth it to VOD review again because I didn't do the last couple major events because I was like, "Oh, Lugia! Mirror again, let's go!"
Dude, I
But,
think we had it was bad. I mean, for so many regionals and stuff, we tried to avoid the Lugia mirror match
mhm,
a decent bit. I mean, we would have it on every once in a while, but we tried to avoid it just because it's been so played out at this point, right?
yeah.
But then it kind of became we were just featuring Lugia versus Mew a lot, and
Yeah.
because like those are the two of the more powerful decks, two decks that are really popular amongst the top players. And so I mean, probably like 30+% of our stream matches at some of those last regionals were just Lugia versus Mew matches.
Yeah, you couldn't really avoid like, even if you try to avoid Lugia Mirror specifically, you can't avoid Lugia itself. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
it's Lugia versus Lost Box or Lugia versus Mew or Lugia Mirror.
yeah.
Um,
Is bound to be on the table most of the most of the games.
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so we've talked a little bit just about what Azul's trip was like to EUIC. We'll chat a little bit now about the results. And I guess before we get into the results, we'll talk a little bit about the meta share, what ended up being popular on the day, what ended up being popular into day number 2. But even before we get into that, Azul, why don't you just kind of fill us in on how you kind of approach this tournament? What did your testing look like once you got to London? I know most of your testing, like from when we talked last week on the podcast, it was really late Monday night for you. You hadn't really felt like you'd done a lot of testing yet. But
Yeah.
I imagine the next few days were just full of games and full of discussion and full of, trying to figure out, okay, what are we doing for this format? So what did that process look like for you guys? Did you go through the gauntlet of all of these decks, consider playing all of the decks, or I don't know, just general what did the process look like?
I mean, we played through a lot of the decks. I made sure that we kind of wrote off a couple of them immediately because I don't think they're very good, and I don't think my opinion's really changed on that. It's like Maridon and Lost Tina, I think, are still terrible decks overall in the meta. I think Tina's actually just a terrible deck. I think Maridon's a very powerful deck, but I don't think the meta's right for it. We did see one get the top 8, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I still don't think the meta's right for Maridon. I think Lost Tina is just a terrible deck. Maridon's actually a very powerful deck. It's kind of like Mew, where the meta does not feel quite right for it. Um, so I made sure we didn't like waste any time on those. The Sable Zard is actually something that I thought of literally before rotation even happened. And I kind of just been like sitting on it for a while. I didn't play any games with it because I knew it was probably just good. And the question would be, would it be good enough? I had mentioned it to like the group a little bit,
Mhm.
but no one had really we didn't put any really time into it until the event actually happened. But yeah, I had like thought about the whole process of the whole idea of Sablezard could be good, and then once I saw initial Lugia lists and Guardy lists, it's like, okay, well, you can just Mawile win the game against them with Pidgey. So I had that in the back pocket, like since rotation was about to happen. Once I saw the initial lists for everything, so kind of just sat on that, and then that's kind of everything else. Like we went through Guardy, we did some Guardy games. We're trying to make Guardy feel good against Lost Box, which we just weren't able to do. Otherwise, Guardy probably would have been what we played. And like I even mentioned last week on the cast, I felt like Guardy, if you just played a Guardy list and you're like, all right, screw the Lost Box matchup, I'm just going to play a Guardy list that is as consistent as possible for everything else. It's probably a pretty reasonable play, and that's what we kind of saw Tor did, right? Zero techs for the Lost Box matchup. You could maybe say the Penny's probably pretty strong against Lost Box, and so
You
is
had
the
the
Collapse
Cresselia in
Stadium.
there too.
Well, yeah, Creselia's come in kind of like a Creselia's not that good against Lost Box. It's
Yeah.
like it's just something to attack with, but it's like good
It
in other
still
matchups as
played the
well.
Manaphy in the deck as well.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So, I mean, we did some stuff. We tried to make Guardy feel comfortable against Lost Box. We weren't able to do it. We got pretty close with a couple different ideas. Um, I was never really on Lost Box. A couple of the other guys of the group were like the idea of some kind of build of Lost Box. I was kind of off Lost Box sense rotation, like the
Like
beginning of the
Mirage Gate
format.
Lost Box, you mean?
Yeah, just like Mirage Gate stuff, like that kind of Lost Box. Yeah, Sable's Art is definitely different. Mirage Gate Lost Box, I've never really been a fan of the idea of in this format. It might be better than I kind of give it credit for. I made sure we didn't waste any time on Mew. Goodra was something that we tried out for a little bit, and we did think it was like actually decently strong, and it kind of worked. Like it was just kind of working. We didn't spend a ton of time on arc pile stuff, which is kind of what ended up winning. But maybe we should have spent a little bit more time on arc pile. Um, but yeah, that was kind of it. Just try to play a bunch of games with a bunch of different decks, and the end result was that we felt like the Sable Zard was probably going to give us the best chance of taking down the tournament, and we went with it.
Yeah, and yeah, I think this deck seemed pretty good. It was kind of interesting. You talk about the Mawile. You identified it pretty early on, like, oh, this card is really, really good. And we talked about it as well. You thinking that the Mawile was pretty good, and then in the weeks following, we started to see a little bit of things popping up on Twitter. People posting pictures of the card, or
Yeah.
people were playing it in their decks in the Limitless tournaments online and stuff like that. So people kind of did that scare you a little bit when debating to play a tech like that as kind of being your main answer to things like Lugia and Guardy, whenever it's kind of like becoming a known thing? And we even saw people respecting Mawile, right? Like people like Toward playing the Penny plus Palpad in his deck.
Yeah. I would say I don't think it really scared. So I mean, for the Guardian matchup, you don't need it. It's just a
Sure, sure,
nice
sure.
addition, but especially against like Clef Keys, it's really good. Like your route against Clef Key can be like, this actually saw something we saw a little bit different in Pedro's list. Is Pedro played the Mill Tank to try and stop like the Hatterini or the Reggie Lucky hit and run. You can set up the Mill Tank to actually kind of stop that. We didn't really think about that at all. But you can also kind of do the same thing with Mawile into Sableye. You go Mawile, trap the Clef Key, and then retreat to Sableye. Sableye KOs it with Scratch.
Yeah.
So you can do like that little combo or something like that to
The
get
little
around them.
scratch.
But I also just think like Clef Key Hatterini is just like bad. like Clef Keys in Maridon might be okay, but I think like Clef Key Hatterini in Guardy is just bad. So that's another thing where I was just like, okay, I'm just kind of fine losing to that because I don't think those kind of lists will do very well because I think it's so clunky. Um, but the yeah, seeing people like kind of like catch on to Mawile before the tournament was kind of unfortunate, of course. Would have been nice if no one had caught on to it. But I feel like that's never going to happen in the current day and age of Pokemon. Everything moves so much faster. Like if we were back in 2012, Mawile would have been an insane tech card to have come up with and played,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But in 2023, it's like, oh, you're playing the tech that everyone knows about. But I do think um, people are a little bit less likely to want to tech for something until it actually performs. This tournament was, I guess, a little bit more 50-50. But I think now that Mawile has performed, we saw Pedro in top 8 with it. We saw people proving that they played the card. It's like if there's no proof of people playing the card in a major tournament, then people don't really want to tech for it, kind of thing, you know?
Right.
Like the deck has to do well for people to actually want to put the tech cards in. But now I think we will see it be added. But yeah, I think the hype itself wasn't enough to really change everyone's mind. Like the first 2 rounds I beat in at USC was 2 Lugias that didn't play a switch card. Like I just beat them with Mawile. So
Did you always just approach the games in those instances of like, I'm going with Mawile until they show me an answer, and I'm just committing to this?
basically
And if
have to
they,
do that.
yeah,
Because if
yeah,
they show you the answer, they can just mill you on that turn with T-Tar. So they can literally just win the game. I actually did the person I played against who did have I played against another Lugia who I did end up tying. They did play an escape rope. Um, but they played it poorly because they could have just decked me out, but instead they waited until they could just do the combo, and then they went like escape rope their Luminion, send up their T-Tar, collapse Stadium away their Luminion, and then mill. Or then they went Judge Mill instead of just waiting until I had 1 or 2 cards in deck and then just milling me out.
yeah,
So, and I actually had a chance to draw into a combination of cards that actually would have won me the game. I could have re-looped them with Echoing Horn because they had the Luminion in the discard pile now, but I didn't draw the combination of cards, so they messed up on that. But I ended up losing that game anyways because it's really hard to recover from that when I'm not like putting damage and play the whole game or setting anything up. I was still like using Colress, but like my board was very underdeveloped. And then they had already like drawn been up like a prize card or something. So it was really hard. It would have been really hard for me to come back. But then game 2, I just kind of beat them by attacking, which you can do. You can just beat the Lugia matchup is still pretty close, even if you don't trap something and win with Mawile. It's just like the Mawile play is nice to also have.
yeah, for sure.
Um, but yeah, I don't think it was like too big of a detriment to playing the deck. Was the idea that Mawile was kind of a known quantity or a semi-known quantity for sure.
All right. Before we get into the meta share, I just got to ask as well. So you tweeted before the event, if anyone can guess correctly what Caleb Gettimer proxied all 3 of these cards as, I'll give them 100 pounds. So for anyone who's listening, Azul tweeted this picture, said that his testing partner Caleb had proxied these three cards, and the three cards pictured were Gengar, Regidrago V, and Sydney. Did anyone in the comments get it right?
They did, and I still have to message them to give them 100 pounds.
I'm keeping you honest here, Azul. I'm keeping you
Yeah, I still
honest.
have to send them a message. But yeah, someone did guess them correctly, but I'm
Well,
not
are
gonna
you
say
letting us
yet.
know? Okay,
Well, no.
okay.
So anyone else who wants to go to have a guess at it can go ahead and have a guess at it.
Well, no,
Someone did
someone's
get it
already
correct
guessed it
though.
though. I'm not gonna. You're not gonna, be out more
Oh,
than
I guess that's
100,
true.
right?
That's true. Never mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it is. Well, do you want to have a guess, Chip? Did you have an idea?
Oh man, now I kind of want to scroll through these comments. I mean, I saw a ton of people were guessing like Sableye, Dragonite, and like Boss or something like that. I saw that guess I think multiple times, but I think what people don't understand is that Caleb has so many cards, and also you guys have played Lost Box so much. Caleb definitely has enough Dragon, or like there were enough Dragonite V and Sableye in the room that those cards would not have had to have been proxied, like for sure, right? That's what I think at least. So I don't have a super strong guess one way or the other, but I
It
did think
is
it was funny.
Sableye,
Oh,
Dragonite V, and then the Sydney is a Colress.
what?
We had a lot of Lost Box decks built at some point, a lot.
Oh
And
my
usually when we
gosh.
test, we only use Caleb's cards. So usually when we're testing, we only use Caleb's cards. So yeah, that was I do still have to message the person who did get it right. I saw they got it right. They got it right like in like the first hour of me tweeting it, or two
Yeah,
hours
those are
after, right
that's
when I was
like
about to head to bed.
super disappointing to be honest. Like
Yeah, would
I would have thought they would have
have been
been
nice if it was cooler for
more
sure.
difficult than that. I think for it to have been worthy of a tweet, I would have expected it to be just some like crazy off the wall cards. Like someone guessed like Urshifu and Thornton and like that's more in line with what I would have predicted, right? Just stuff that like, is more off the wall. But yeah, it is what it is. You had a lot of Lost Box decks built.
We had a lot of Lost
Sableyes are
Box
like
decks
10
built.
bucks now, so it makes sense that there wouldn't be too many of them floating around, I guess.
That was kind of our second, like as far as our testing went, our baseline was Lugia. If a deck couldn't beat Lugia, then we just stopped testing it. So and then our follow up deck with that was Lost Box. So I was like, all right, if the deck can beat Lugia, then we get to test it more against, or if an idea beat Lugia, then we tested it more against Lost Box and so on and so forth. So those are like really the only two decks that we knew we had to beat, and then everything else after that could just be theory or just be like, well, we don't have to beat everything, so you don't have to beat that. Like if we lose to a Miraidon or a Mew, we were like content with those losses, which we did kind of like. Our Mew matchup was not great with the Sablezard that we played. I was content with taking that rough matchup.
I can't believe you
In
wagered
hindsight,
$100 that no one would guess that those were the three cards. Like, wha- that's I don't know. That's like not an unreasonable guess for someone to have made. I'm still
it's
getting
like,
over
why did you do this?
that. Poor use.
um, but uh, but yeah, yeah. So the Mew matchup was not great, so we took kind of that risk, and I was like fine with
Sure.
that. In hindsight, maybe we shouldn't have. I still think Mew was a pretty bad play. We did see Pablo get top four. I really like Pablo's list as well. I think Pablo had a really cool take on the list or on the deck. And I do think maybe like the fan of waves that Pablo played was also kind of like the key to the Lugia matchup, to having like an okay Lugia matchup.
Bruh.
But we can talk about that a little bit further.
Yeah, we'll talk about it a little further. I sent a list in our Discord that was like three cards different than Pablo's list like a week
I
before
mean,
the tournament.
I still wouldn't
Okay,
play
okay, sure, sure, sure,
Mew.
sure.
It doesn't matter what kind of list you sent me. You could have had four fan waves in there. I still would have been like, no, that's all right, Chip.
There were two. There were two.
Take that
One's
to your
probably a
league
little better.
challenge.
Yeah, to the league challenge. All right, well, let's
Yeah.
move on and let's talk about the meta share for the event. What decks were popular? What people decided to bring to the tournament? And I don't think this was too much of a surprise, but in day one, Lost Zone Box was the most popular deck. I probably assume that this groups together both Sableye Charizard and Mirage Gate builds. I don't know if they're separate or not. I would have to actually ask someone maybe, but um yeah, Lost Box being most popular. And honestly, just Comfey engine decks dominating the tournament because it was Lost Zone Box, Lost Zone Giratina, and Hisuian Goodra V-Star, all three in the top six.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty, I think it's like pretty reasonable. I think what are we missing like from this top cut that seems off? Is there anything
I
that we're
mean,
really
there's no
missing?
Arceus deck, there's no Maridon, right? But
I
I
mean, but it's
think
not
those.
no Arceus deck being there isn't like a no. It's like, anything
Yeah.
that's a surprise that's missing. Yeah, no Maridon I think is probably the one that stands out the most, right? Like maybe
Yeah.
Maridon would have been another one to
I think
be in this top six, but it's not like a surprise that Goodra was getting some hype going into the tournament. I feel like as well as kind of picking up steam once again, which is like how Goodra does. It just kind of picks up steam. But I think we'll see Sablezard in the top six, like moving forward from here on out. Like that's not a deck that I would expect to be in the top six, but I think moving forward, Sablezard will probably, unless
yeah,
it's just unless it's just in the Lost Zone box decks,
and
it's
it
just in
might
that
be.
percentage. Yeah,
It might be. It might be worth separating those two because they are
yeah.
pretty different decks, right? But
It should
yeah,
be like Comfy, Mirage Gate, and then Comfy Other.
yeah.
Should probably be how it breaks down.
Maybe it should just be Lost Zone. Maybe the Radiant Pokemon they play should be the differentiator, right?
Oh, oh,
Lost
Radiant.
Zone
Oh, okay, yeah,
Greninja,
yeah. I like
Lost Zone
that. I like that.
Charizard, right?
Yeah, that would be okay as well. I think mine's a little bit better, but we can allow
And
it.
then Lugia being the second most popular deck. It's not something we've ever seen before on one of these graphs. Lugia Archeops being in the
Yeah.
second place, not the first place. Obviously, post rotation things are a lot different. Lugia proving though that it is still very strong, and it was still a really popular choice overall in the tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see that flip probably, and it could be even Guardy at number one to be honest. But I don't think, and this is what I love. This is what a real meta will feel like. I don't think Lost Box is holding that number one spot after EUIC. I think Lost
I
Box in
agree.
general is a little overhyped. Like I said, like going into this format, I was not hype on Mirage Gate Lost Box at all. I think this tournament results kind of definitely showcases that it's not head and shoulders above the rest of the decks, right? Like Lugia was kind of last format. And that's the beautiful thing about an actual meta is there's actual evolution to the meta, right? Like last format, it was Lugia 30% day one, 40% day two for the whole time, and then everything else kind of floated under that, but nothing ever really like could like take command of like being the next most popular deck, or shift up the meta enough that something could become the next most popular deck. But I think that's what we'll see here. And it could stay on as Lugia being the most popular after that for forever. But yeah, I think Lost Box will definitely not be number one moving forward. I'll be surprised if it ever regains that spot. I don't think it will.
Then we saw Guardian Mew both at between 11 and 12%. Is that kind of what you guys had predicted? Maybe a little bit more Mew than what you were expecting?
I think we were like, no, I think I think our predictions were 2020 on the top two, around
Hmm.
2020. We were close on that. I think it was like 10 for Guardy, 10 for Mew. Uh, Tina, I think we maybe said like there was like sevens for Tina's and Gudra's, like 5 to 7 for Tina, Gudra, Maridon. What other decks? I feel like we're missing a deck in that percentage in those decks. And let me look up like a meta. No, I think that was that's the way we predicted basically for the most part.
I think that's it. I don't think we're
And then
missing
Arc
anything.
Piles were at like 4% or something.
Yeah,
I'm
unless
looking
you're
at like a meta
predicting
breakdown right now of like decks. And I'm trying to like jog my
like the
memory, but
Urshifu
yeah.
deck or something.
No, we didn't think about that
Yeah.
deck at all.
So I don't think that you're missing anything there.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Um, But then, yeah, so I mean, I think the biggest surprise to me was seeing the Goodra up here. Like you said, it was gaining a lot of popularity
Yeah.
moving into the tournament. So it kind of makes sense that it would sneak in there at the sixth spot. But maybe a little bit more surprising is when we go from day one over to day two, Goodra jumps up to 15% of the day
Yeah,
two. So
really
it
good.
really good conversion rate into day two. And Lugia also having a really
Yeah.
solid conversion rate, jumping all the way up to 27% of the day two decks.
Yeah, so pretty good conversion rate for I mean Lugia having a good conversion rate. I mean Lugia still feels like it's like it's like Lost Box, I think compared to like something like a Lost Box, it's easy to misplay with Lost Box. It's
Hmm.
harder to misplay with Lugia, and like fundamentally, it's just like an easier deck to play. So we'll see the success of it naturally just be really good because like it doesn't matter the level of play you are for the most part. If you draw well enough, I mean, obviously there's going to be some put like skill will have a still a big impact on how you play, but if you play well, you play decently well. Um, you're gonna do well with Lugia, right? Chance of you doing well with Lugia is like pretty reasonable. But with Lost Box, if you're not playing like perfect, it's possible you're just gonna have a really bad day, right? So it having a really good conversion rate, I think we'll consistently see from Lugia still. And then we see like Guardian and me were pretty much neutral. Lost Zone Tina fell off a little bit. But yeah, Gudra getting a huge jump up. I think it's just because Gudra is just pretty good positioned in the meta. Also, it probably has to do with it has a good Lugia and Lost Box matchup. I actually think you're favored against Lugia. For like the little bit that we
Yeah.
put into the deck, testing up leading to the event, it did feel like Gudra was slightly favored into the Lugia matchup
Yeah, I
overall.
could see it. I mean, most
And
people
your
were
Lost Box
playing
matchup
double.
is solid as well.
Yeah, Lost Box seems decent. your Mew matchup, I mean, pretty much all of them were playing double Drapion, it looked like, or pretty decent percentage of them
Yeah.
were. So that's going to give you I mean, if you just put two Drapion in your deck, you're going to have a good time against Mew most of the time.
I mean, that feels a little overkill. I think you could get away with one still, but yeah, it's gonna make it that much harder for you.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see double Drapion in Alex's deck because you could just go Drapion and then Vulpix V Star power, right? And it's like pretty much
You
the same thing.
can't. Well, no, if they don't bench on that turn again, we actually did them. When we were testing arc pile decks, we're like, okay,
They can
oh, well,
play
you don't
around
actually
it.
get there. Yeah, you can play around it pretty reasonably, actually.
Okay, okay,
Especially if you still play the Oricorio,
sure,
not
makes
getting the
sense
one hit
then.
KO.
Probably
I think in
this.
arc decks though, you could still get away with one Drapion probably because I think an arc can probably pull out 3 prize cards somewhere at a point. It's two KO and a Mew, or KO and
I mean, you
two
still have
prizers. Like,
Duraludon, which is decent against
yeah,
them. Yeah.
you can maybe make it work with one Drapion for sure. But just playing double Drapion and like making it from like maybe a slightly favored matchup to maybe a 50-50 to like a guaranteed win is like that's pretty nice, right?
Yeah, especially a deck that's going to be a decent percentage of the meta. But yeah,
Actually,
Goodra went way up.
the Goodra deck's actually playing double Drapion is a little curious to me because they only play like 2 stadiums, right? Unless what did Aiden actually play?
Aiden had two Drapion.
Yeah, but with how many stadium bumps did you Aiden
He
play?
had two, one Beach Court, one Crystal Cave.
The
No vacuum.
yeah, see that's a little curious to me because that feels like it's gonna be hard to get value out of your second trade. There's no Clara either, right?
Well,
So you can
you can
it's gonna be
Mirage
hard to
Gate
get.
to it. You can Melanie attach
That's
Mirage
true. I
Gate.
guess
Yeah.
okay. You could just load it up. I guess yeah, you could just do that. All right, that's
Which
fair.
is
That's fair.
the roundabout way of doing it. But yeah, I mean, if we look at the day
Yeah.
two, there was 25 Gudras in day two. Oh, I misspoke, I guess. I was maybe more looking at Aiden's list who got top eight, but it looks like the average was 1.1 Drapion in
Okay,
lists
so
for the
maybe
day
just
two.
Aiden was the. So it's probably just Aiden then. Maybe one
Yeah.
other person.
What? Yeah, one or two people total.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. More reasonable.
But yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things that Gudra gained in this format is just the fact that people are now playing Melanie in the deck. Like Melanie lets you make a turn two Gudra way easier than having
Hmm.
to focus hard into the Colress strategy, right? And forcing yourself to play Mirage Gate. Obviously, Mirage Gate's still insanely powerful, and you want to get to Mirage Gate eventually, but the fact that you can just go turn one, attach, turn two, attach Melanie, boom, rolling iron, like that's pretty reasonable to pull off.
Yeah, definitely.
And
And I actually talked
we
to
even saw that the guy that won Fort Wayne with
had the
Gudra,
melodies. Yeah,
yeah,
had
he
the
had the
melodies.
Melanies, Max Johnson.
Yeah, so this is probably where the melody train started. I think it makes sense. I was a little bit skeptical about that kind of split of like gates and melodies and being like, well, shouldn't you just play heavier for your lost zone build up? It's like then you just get to your gates. I think the flip side of that as well, having the access to melodies just gives you more. And then it's like on the flip side of that, well, what if you just played heavy for melodies? Like, why do you even play lost zone stuff? Right? What if you just melodied? But then it's harder to build up your follow up dragon Guja. So I think actually, yeah, I think the combination of lost zone plus melody does provide a really good balance to getting Guja's out up and out consistently, and then going into your follow up Gudra.
Yeah.
One thing I will say definitely is like stop playing. Still seen a couple people playing two Guja V. Stop doing that. Just put the third Guja V in the deck. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, leave that behind. Leave that behind. Let's get
Yeah,
the third
I think it is
Gudra.
correct. I think the gates plus the melody does seem to be correct because it's the best, it's the most consistent balance of getting your first Gudra set up, whether it be through the melody or the chorus, and then be able to most consistently get that follow up Gudra if you do need it, or even the big explosive plays like through setting up a Drapion under path or attacking with Greninja, which is like a really powerful tool. An
Yeah.
option in the Lugia matchup specifically because your Gudra doesn't want to KO anything in the Lugia matchup. You don't want to KO anything with your Gudra. So being able to use Greninja to like clean up like 4 prize cards at the end of the game is like a pretty big deal for sure.
No, definitely makes a lot of sense. Yeah, Gudra, I mean, I think moving forward, we could even see Gudra in day one be like third most
Yeah.
popular potentially. Like I
I don't
could
know. The
see it
Guardian
happening.
matchups, I think the Guardian matchup is pretty bad for Gudra, but maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. Also, another thing as far as playing against Gudra goes, if you're playing Lugia, put your V Guard energy. I saw a couple people do this actually at at the tournament when I was sitting next to Lugia versus Gudra. Put your V Guard energy on your T-Tar because then Gudra can't KO it with the choice belt. Powerful tips.
That's pretty smart. That's pretty smart.
Yeah.
Free coaching from Azul. He normally charges for that information right
Yeah. To put your V Guard energy on the Pokemon so it doesn't get KO'd.
there. Yeah. Yeah, good tips, good tips. Well, yeah, let's just I mean, we've looked at the meta day 1, day 2. Let's look at just the results. And starting off with Alex Shemansky getting the win with Arceus Duraludon. First off, big congratulations to Alex. I think we've talked about him on the podcast in the past. He's someone who has gotten second place a lot, partially in part thanks to Azul for several of those times getting
Do what
second
I can.
place. But everyone knew that Alex was a great player, and it was just a matter of time before the cards were going to fall in his favor. He was going to get a major tournament win. He did win the Players Cup 4, which counts for something, but I think
Yeah.
people obviously put the most stock in the IRL events, and Alex was able to finally take down an IC with an anti-meta deck, which is super interesting as well, because usually these major tournaments, like the first tournament of a new format and especially a rotation, the lists we see do the best are just consistent versions of whatever the best one or two decks are, right?
Yeah. Like
But
the best build currently of them.
Alex played an anti-meta deck, which is really risky going into a tournament when there's not real results to build off of. Obviously, there is still going to be a meta. There's still people talking, and we do have some online events, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a risky call to want to roll up with an anti-meta deck like this, but it paid off big time. Alex Shermansky getting the win.
Yeah, I think that but that's another thing I think leading towards. I talked about this a little bit. I figured I mentioned this around, but like just the development of everything happens so much faster in the current day and age. So like you knew kind of what to expect. And we even saw, I think something that wouldn't have been predictable that we did see develop a little bit was people like including stuff like their own Duraludon in Lugia, and we saw like the
Yeah.
Single Strike Urshifu in Lugia as well. And I'm sure if Single Strike Urshifu was staple in Lugia, you probably couldn't have played this deck specifically, right? You probably would not have played Arctur, but maybe the matchup is still close. That's something that I would have to personally test. But um, yeah, I mean the meta evolves so fast, and we have these all big online tournaments, like decently sized online tournaments, to kind of play off a little bit for sure. As far as meta development goes, that you could get a pretty reasonable read on the meta. I feel like before it actually before these tournaments happen. So yeah, it's not too big of a surprise for me for sure. I don't think it's like too big of a surprise, but yeah, Alex finally getting the dub took him a little while, but yeah, everyone was kind of just it was kind of just like a waiting for it to happen. It definitely is going to happen eventually.
Now I think it's Grant is officially the person with the most top eights without a major win. So
Yeah.
we'll see if he can pick it up at some point.
What if that's like the you have to hit 13 top eights before you actually get to win a tournament? So now Grant has to get a couple more.
Yeah, Grant is just a couple away. But yeah, so Alex was able to take down Tord, which the fact that Tord was even playing in the finals is incredible.
Hmm.
Obviously, he's won 4 ICs. This is actually his sixth IC finals that he's played
A
in.
lot of them.
He got second place at NAIC in 2018, the year Stefan won. I believe it was
I mean,
2018.
2019? No, 2018. You're right. You're right. Yeah,
Yeah,
2018.
2018. His Zoro control deck, right? Um, so yeah, I mean, congratulations to Tord, just further cementing himself as one of the best to ever do it. And playing Gardevoir, the new archetype, the new deck. So, I mean, he's someone who played Lugia pretty much the entirety of last format. Obviously, the power level of the deck went way down with rotation, and the potential for Gardevoir is super, super high. And we know Tord loves trade, right? He won multiple majors with Zoroark GX. So, I think him getting a chance to say refinement, or maybe I don't know. I wonder. Do you think Tord said trade or refinement whenever he was discarding cards?
Maybe nothing. A lot of people don't say anything. I don't say anything.
That's
I would just like
true.
tap the card on my curly and then put it in the discard pile. So maybe nothing.
But yeah, Tord getting second place with the Gardevoir. What'd you think of his list?
It was cool. I mean, I think it was like I even mentioned on the cast last week. Like I feel like Gardevoir like kind of disrespecting Lost Box was almost the way to go, and I feel like that's what Tord kind of went with here for the most part. I mean, like you mentioned, or even I mentioned, the Collapse Stadium is there, the Penny is there, which are both like reasonable tools against Lost Box. The Collapse Stadium is definitely I would say better because you could like pick off like one of your own damage guard EXs against Lost Box or something. The Penny's like meh because like they're usually one hit KO in any of your basic Pokemon anyways. That's the idea. And then besides that, you have the Roxanne in there. Like you said, the Cresselia can be a cool tool. The problem with the Cresselia in the matchup is like they're usually like if they're using Sableye, they're KOing the Pokemon. So it's not like they're sitting there and being like 20 to everything. They're going, all right, knock out your Curlia, 40 on your Manaphy, right?
Yeah,
And then going from there, right?
it's
So
something that can
Cresselia is
allow you to
like
be aggressive into like just
I
comfes on the bench and stuff, though.
yeah, I think the more power from it comes from the 110, from the just having that the what is it, Lunar Blast? Is that the name of the attack? Yeah, I think that's like where the most power because then you don't have to sit as Zacian in your active. It gives you like a way to be a little bit more aggressive early without putting a potential two prizer in your active after you've already put like 6 damage counters on or something. But Zacian's also a really good tool for the early game as well.
So
And then, yeah,
the
there was the rare candies in here, so you actually have the potential for, like, a turn 2 attack,
yeah.
specifically, which I think is, like, a pretty important thing to have in the Lost Box matchup as well, is, like, to be able to attack turn 2 potentially.
It seems like most lists were going with 3 rare candies coming into the tournament or 0 rare candies, and you were
Yeah.
talking last week about how you liked 0 rare candies, and I think Tord kind of found the happy medium here, right? 2 rare candies with kind of the idea that you're gonna play 1 in a game, right? Is
Yeah.
kind of the idea, and having 2 gives you a reasonable enough chance, like, I mean, if you get a couple rolls down turn 1, you're gonna get a few refinements in. It's reasonable that you'll see a rare candy on turn 1 or turn 2, excuse me, so you can get that turn 2 Guardy. The big standouts to me in this list that are really differentiating from what people were playing coming into the tournament is that Tord only played 1 Shining Arcana Gardevoir. He had 2 Zacian V, which was, maybe not the craziest thing. That was kind of, some people played 1, some people played 2.
I was kinda getting,
Um,
like I felt like getting hyped up
yeah, I
coming into
agree.
the UIC was the doubleization.
And then the Luminion is kind of the big card that pretty much
Yeah.
no one was playing that I saw, coming into the tournament and toward and I think Robin as well played the same 60, right? And got
Yeah, I
top
think so.
64, top 32, top 32. So, yeah, obviously, I mean, Tord is a pretty great player, pretty great deck builder as well. I think this list seems like a pretty solid one all around, and if you're wanting to start with Gardevoir, this seems like a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely. That is the sketchiest thing for me, actually, now that I noticed it, there's no rescue carrier. I was a huge fan of the rescue carrier. And it's not even for the lost box to match up so much. It felt like it was more strong against when you had like a slow start up against like a Lugia or something, and they started boss picking off your Ralts and Curlia pretty early on, pretty aggressively. It's when like the rescue carrier felt like really, really good. Or like an unfortunate escape rope or something. But if you usually open up, like if you don't prize a Ralts and then you open up pretty aggressively, which is not too hard for the deck to do. Like the deck can usually get out like 4 to 6 basic Pokemon turn one pretty reasonably. You can usually push up, like Greninja or something to get KO'd as opposed to losing a Ralts on the turn. So definitely something worth testing out as well. But yeah, when I did play with the rescue carrier, I found the rescue carrier to feel extremely strong. So that's like the biggest thing that I feel like is missing. That I was something that like I felt like was really really good for sure. But I think we'll probably see moving forwards instead of Penny, we'll probably be seeing Escape Rope in this deck to deal with the Vulpix moving forwards. Because I think that's all you really need, right? Once you include the Escape Rope, you kind of auto win the Vulpix matchup. I guess with only one boss, it's still a little bit weird. Because the
Yeah,
idea would
that's
be that
probably
you,
the other thing worth mentioning is that he did only play the 1 boss.
yeah, only one boss. Usually people were playing like one boss, one Serena. Um, but yeah, I think like moving forward, we'll see people add the Escape Rope to deal with the Vulpix V Star. I think for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, it's probably the best thing to I mean, is there any basic psychic attacker that you could add that doesn't have an ability that would also get in there?
Might be. There might
That's
be. I don't
also
know. I'd have to
something to
look through them.
consider. And that's
Yeah.
that's kind of, I mean, you talked about earlier how this is like a real meta, what a real meta feels like. It's like how do the Gardevoir players adjust to the Vulpix winning the tournament, right? And then does
Yeah.
Alex's deck, right? That's the thing about anti-meta decks is that they're really good for a specific meta. Moving forward, they're a lot weaker, right?
Yeah, I think we'll still see some people play them and try to make them work, but I think it'll be one of those things where I'm trying to think of a good example. Oh, it's like Decidueye. Like during the pandemic, there was like the Decidueye, what do people call it? The like graph or whatever, the flow chart. It's like Decidueye wins a tournament, everyone texts for Decidueye. You can't play Decidueye for 2 weeks. No one texts for Decidueye. Decidueye wins a tournament. Everyone texts for Decidueye. Repeat infinitely. So the Decidueye flow chart, I think, could be coming into play with something around Vulpix, where it's like Vulpix probably won't be great for the next couple of major tournaments, but on that third major tournament, is anyone going to really be playing Escape Rope in Guardy anymore at that point? Vulpix hasn't been seen in a top 8 for weeks now. Why would you want to play this card that's really not that good in the deck overall when you could play like another consistency card and then everyone cuts their Escape Rope and then Vulpix wins a tournament and then repeat? So yeah, could see something cheesy like that happening. The flow chart for the Guardy versus or the Vulpix VSAR flow chart could be something we come up here, at least in this matchup, right? And it could be something that's a little bit more matchup based, where it's not like as universal as the Decidueye was, because the Decidueye beat like everything when no one was taking for it. You literally beat every single deck in the format, basically. So that was a little bit different. But for this matchup, we could see the Vulpix VSAR versus Guardy flow chart happening as of right now.
And then if we look at the top 4, we had Pedro Eugenio Torres with his Lost Box deck up against, or not up against, he played against Alex, and then Pablo Meza on the other side of the bracket, losing to Tord, and Pablo, of course, playing the Mew. So, I mean, also one other thing to mention, I mean, if you just look at that top four, I mean, obviously all these players who made top eight are great, but you look at the top four, I mean, that's four top tier players. The
Mhm.
first tournament back, first new format, pretty cool to see.
Yeah. And if you take a look at Pedro, we start. Or do you want to start with Pablo? Pablo or Pedro?
Pablo got third, so let's start with Pablo.
Okay. All right. So start with Pablo playing the Mew. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of Mew. I don't think the deck's that great. But I do like Pablo's list. No Oricorio. I think it makes sense. There's not really that much damage reduction to get. Like the 310 versus 330 HP on a clean Mew doesn't matter too much right now. I think it's like more so matters to like protect your Genesects in weird situations and your Mew Vs. But yeah, so the no Oricorio, and then just being pretty much as straightforward as consistent as possible, right? 4 Pats of the Peak, 4 Vacuum to make sure you can remove them.
Yep.
For the supporter line, 3 Judge, 3 Boss, 1 Avery, which I think is like a strong card actually in the Guardy matchup, because you can go like Avery to reduce their bench down to just Ralts, and then escape rope and force a Ralts into the active, and then knock that out turn 2, as opposed to going after as opposed to like whiffing the boss. Um or having to escape rope up something like a Greninja or something that's a little bit less useful, right? Um, so yeah, really like the list here from Pedro. I guess the spicy tech,
Pablo.
or Pablo, is it Pedro from Pablo?
Yeah, yeah.
Is there's the echoing horning here, of course, and then the spicy tech would be the fan of waves, which is super strong in the Lugia matchup. Removes V Guard energy for easier KOs. Also removes the gift energy, which I think is its strongest attribute. Is like if you get KO'd by a T-Tar and it's got single strike, V Guard, gift, you can fan of waves the gift back to the deck, play the Roxanne, KO the T-Tar, and then hope they didn't get a research off the Roxanne. And if they didn't, then they might not be able to set up their second T-Tar as cleanly,
Yeah.
and that could just be the end of the game for them.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the fan of waves. Seems really good. The Avery is really cool. Tech in here. Avery's kind of just one of those cards that seems to pop up every once in a while, and in metas like this where there, I mean, specifically against Gardevoir, it seems really strong. But I mean, in the Mew mirror, it's probably
Yeah, the
pretty
mirror.
good, right?
Yeah, before
Um,
you Roxanne, if you can hit up with an Avery first, just start to work on their Genesects.
Against stuff like Goodra, it's probably pretty good as well. You can do stuff like Avery, someone who's trying to play around Echoing Horn, right? Avery and then
Yep.
Horn, a two prizer into play that you can KO the next turn or something like that. So, yeah, I'm a fan of this list. Straightforward, consistent. I think Mew's one of the most powerful decks in the format, obviously. So, just playing a consistent list of a very powerful deck. The four vacuum, four path. Very similar to that list. Like you played, were you one of the first people to play four vacuum, four path and Mew like forever ago, like 6 months ago?
I
Do you remember
think
that?
I did 3 and 3, but I did copy a list that was in Japan. Like I initially just
Okay.
copied a list from Japan, but I think it was 3 and 3. Um,
Went
yeah,
super heavy on the control side.
yeah. As far as Mew, as far as control Mew can go, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if I'm gonna play in, I was thinking about playing in like the late night tournament, the one in the morning tomorrow. If I play in that tomorrow, I'm just gonna play Pedro or Pablo's. I keep messing them up. Just gonna play Pablo's
It's because
Mew
we're
deck,
talking
I
about
think.
Pedro next. It's okay.
Yeah, Pedro on the mind.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
also I will say if you have not watched Pablo versus Tord, it was a really good set overall. But game one specifically, Pablo just, I mean, it was really like a master class on how to play the matchup. I mean, he drew well, obviously, which is a good part of it, and then he didn't draw very well in game two and game three, which led to Tord obviously getting into the finals. Um, Honestly, maybe it's better though that Tord won in top four. You know, I mean, I'm friends with Pablo and Tord. I'd be happy to have seen either of them make it to the finals. But just for like competitiveness sake, right? If Pablo makes it to the finals, it's just Pablo versus Alex's double Drapion. And it's
it's
okay,
Rock's path, pray.
yeah, yeah, that's what you gotta do. And you gotta just hope that's enough. But maybe it's a little better that Tord, just for like the competitive sense of things, that Tord ended up getting the win. But
I saw Pablo tweeted out that that he thought he threw
yeah,
against Tord.
I'm kind of curious as well
I didn't
about
watch
that.
it at all.
I
So,
didn't think he threw, and I haven't talked to him yet to
but then
see
you,
exactly what he was talking
yeah,
about.
because then you just said that he dead drew twice. I was like, how could you throw
He
if you just
didn't
dead
dead
drew
draw.
twice?
He just didn't draw super well.
Okay.
It was just kind of like clunky. And in game two, he, I wonder if this is what he's talking about, where he started a Mew and then had like Nest Ball plus VIP pass, and he chose to just get 3 Genesect, which I think is probably correct. But he then only had one Mew in play, and then didn't draw very well off of his Genesects, and then he attacked with that Mew, and then eventually it went down before he could ever find another Mew V, and then he was just going to be too
Mm.
far behind and conceded pretty much right away. So I
Yeah, that's
wonder if
always a
that's what
tough.
he's talking about. And yeah, I agree. It is always really tough to
That's a
decide in
yeah.
that instance.
Yeah, that situation comes up all the time with you. That's always a tough situation to actually break down as to which way is better. Do you get the triple Genesect now, so you get that like, potential extra card on the third Genesect, or you get the second Mew, which gives you like a cleaner, more stuff to do with potential card you draw into by having the second Mew in play. Yeah, so it's a tough
So
situation.
I think he's probably
I
being
would
a
be
little too
curious
hard
though.
on himself to call it a throw,
Yeah,
assuming that's what he's talking about at least. But I mean, it's tough to be in that high pressure situation and like not high pressure. I mean, it is high pressure, but Pablo's obviously someone who's very. I would say Pablo is probably comfortable and he's been in those spots
yeah,
plenty of times, right? So I don't
yeah.
expect him to be someone to like fall under the pressure. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think he's probably just he's a tough competitor and he's probably just
Yeah,
being hard on himself.
seems like it probably.
And then we can move on and
But
chat
now let's talk
about.
about Pablo's deck
No, you did
with
not just
Disables
say
Art.
that. You-
Oh my gosh, dude! Oh, Pedro, dude, I actually did. Now let's talk
Oh
about
my
Pedro's deck. So
gosh.
Pedro played Disables Art, um, and I guess I'll talk about like the differences between like what we played and what Pedro went with here.
Yeah, his deck is pretty similar to what you guys ended
Yeah,
up on. Probably like what, 7 to 8 cards different, something like that.
pretty close. Yeah, actually, quite a few players who played Disables Art. Like we were all pretty close. So the one thing that I was like wasn't really interested in playing at all that Pedro did play here was the Drapion, of course. The Drapion give you the Mew matchup. You basically just beat Mew if you play it. It's not something that really concerned me at all personally, but looking back on it, maybe should have. And then the only thing I really don't like about Pedro's list is the two Sableye. But besides that, like it's just like the big difference is like lack of cross switchers. But goes for like more boss. So has two boss instead of cross switchers, has the Clara, and then has the Raihan as well. So just more supporters. Oh, and Roxanne. So has a little bit of an edge in the mirror with the Roxanne and the Roxanne. Um, so that's kind of like the basic. No cross switchers, but you just have more cards in there as well. So you got the Drapion for the new matchup, and then the Miltank's kind of cool as well because Miltank stops the Hatterini V or Reggie Lucky V hit and run strategy into a Klefki because they just can't hit the Miltank. So you can sit there and build up your Miltank and then start attacking with it if they don't do something else. So just kind of force them to do something else. There's actually like a pretty cool setup that you can put into play here with the Miltank. So that makes that is the Miltank is pretty cool for that reason, to be honest. So I do kind of like it.
Yep. Had all the kind of normal stuff that you guys had as well. Had the Echoing Horn, the Pidgeot
Yep.
plus Forest Sealstone, the Halucha, those techs are the Halucha being kind of like the tech for the mirror. It's pretty good against
It's good
like
against everything, to be honest. Like, it can
yeah.
always come up. The Luch is just cool. It also allows you to board lock your opponent and then create a bench space on that turn. Like, let's say you like this. The Sables are like auto wins Goodra. It's like a 90-10 matchup, maybe even like it's like insanely good for Sablezard. So because all you do is like you play out of Roxanne range, and then you just draw 4 prize cards in one turn. So you go like Escape Rope plus Boss Zard, back the Goodra into the active, and then Halucha KO double Comfy, and then Charizard for 2, and that's 4 prize cards in a turn.
Yeah.
It's not possible to do that without the Echoing Horn. So if you don't have Echoing Horn, they get to set up 2 Gudras and only put like Comfy Greninja in play. But if they mess up an attack with Cram early, and then have Cram Greninja Comfy, then you can still punish them the same way. But without Horn, you can't kind of force that 4th one prizer into play. So it's kind of important to play the Horn for that matchup. I'd be interested to see if the Gudra player could play it with only putting 2 one prizers in play. If they can do
Yeah.
that, then it gets interesting for sure.
Yeah, Pedro did beat Aiden in top 8, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
as well. So that was the matchup there. And it's kind of interesting too, because you're just used to seeing like Goodra versus Lost Box is usually pretty good for Goodra. But I mean, this is such a different deck, right? It's not the Greninja and Dragonite stuff that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, because like the Lost Box, the Mirage Lost Boxes don't play the Echoing Horn, so they can't force that 4th prize card into play. But the Echoing Horn makes a big difference there.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Force Seal Stone was actually insanely good. We didn't put it into the deck until the night before the tournament, though. We didn't have it in there for a while. But yeah, I'm glad
You
we
just had
did.
Pidgeot V
Right.
floating around by itself,
I mean, you got
just
that's
with
how
the
you have to.
Mawile.
Yeah, you need it for the Mawile trap. Because Lugia doesn't burn any cards to play the game, so you're always decking out
Sure.
first, even once you get the
Sure.
lock set up. So you kind of need the Pidgeot. But yeah, the Force Seal Stone was definitely a really good inclusion. I'm glad we came to that figuring that out for sure because definitely worth the space.
Oh yeah, seems
Um,
very good.
yeah,
And
Sable is really
then
cool right now. I think it's like definitely. I mean, it feels like not that many people knew about it going into the tournament. And I think it might be the better of the two Lost Box decks. To be honest, it's probably close. Mirage Gate is definitely still very strong. It didn't have a great finish overall, but yeah, Sable's Art definitely was under the radar. I think going into the tournament, but now it's very much on the radar moving forward.
for sure, yeah, I'm interested to see if maybe that ends up maybe not the next tournament, but like a couple tournaments down the line, if Sablezard is becoming the more popular way. I know Joe Bernard was like a big
Yeah.
proponent
Oh
of the
yeah.
Sablezard.
Joe actually
um,
got like seemed like it got kind of a little mad on Twitter, like leading up to the tournament. It's like you're all idiots for not thinking that or not respecting Sablezard. It felt like unprovoked. But I think Joe was. I don't even know what Joe was like responding to. Either it was funny. Yeah, you can try and find
just
the tweet. Yeah,
disrespecting
stop
Sablezard.
disrespecting Sablezard. Where's the? Yeah, can you find it? It's got to be a little bit further down.
I Oh, here we go. Why is everyone hating on Zard builds of Lost Box? It's absolutely a deck. Has the room to play vacuums to 10 race and mirror, and can go back to playing quad path to Bully, Lugia, Mew, and Guardy. I swear no one actually plays this game. The phrase in my testing triggers me. They lying.
It's funny because so quad path sucks. Don't play quad path in your Sablezard deck. That's awful. But the it's funny because Joe's making this statement based off in my testing on his side of it. And then this reads like when I feel like this that the Joe's tweet reads like someone is mad in my YouTube comments when I say their deck sucks. That's why I found it so funny because I was like, this comes off as if Joe is reading is someone posting a comment in my YouTube section after I say Maridon sucks or something. No, actually, Maridon doesn't suck. You can play 4 path for the Cardi matchup.
Yeah, you just have to play
It's
Maride
funny.
on my way, right? You're just not
Yeah, yeah, if you play
not building it
Sablezard
right.
my way, yeah, don't put
Yeah.
pathing your Sablezard. But yeah, I thought that was definitely a very funny tweet. It just felt so unprovoked from Joe. I don't know, or maybe that's part of it. Maybe Joe is just trying kind of memeing. Like Joe thought Sablezard was good, and then was also like, how can I make this look like a YouTube comment? Because that just reads like a YouTube comment to
Nah,
me.
bro, it's genuine for sure.
I don't know,
Joe's
Joe. Confirm,
triggered.
Joe, if you're listening to this, confirm in the comment section how how
I think Joe
genuine was your
watches
tweet.
every week, so he'll let us know. He'll let us know.
But yeah,
Um,
take a look at Aiden's list. It's nothing too ridiculous, right? The double Drapion, I think, is like one of the bigger stands out. The Crystal Cave is also something I hadn't seen in
yeah.
many, if any, uh, Goodra decks. And that can cause a little bit of trouble, I think, for Sablezard, just like a teeny bit. They just need to commit a little bit more Sableye damage to the Goodras. But yeah, basically push the gears in the Melanie and the choice belt. Like everything is pretty, I feel like, straightforward here. In this Goodra build, there's nothing too spicy. The spiciest thing that I had seen from Goodra decks leading up to the event was like a one of Sableye to kind of help clean up KOs that the Goodra was like hitting into. That's what I said you can do with Greninja though. You just use Radiant Greninja to do that cleanup instead of like a Sableye. But
Yeah.
yeah, pretty clean, pretty straightforward. Gets the job done.
Yeah, I mean, seems good. We already talked about this a little bit, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But I mean, I think that a lot of people moving forward into Gudra, like this is probably where they'll start, right?
Yeah. I guess
Which
we could
is,
like
I mean, it's not uncommon, right? Like people who want to play a deck, go look at the most recent tournament, go look at the top eight, and if there's a deck they want to play, they base their list off of that top eight list, right?
yeah, and I think just kind of speak to Aiden in general. Aiden's a player, just won Charlotte regionals,
Hmm.
right? Has been like a pretty solid player for a pretty long time. We usually see them pushing for top 8, top 16 at most North American regionals. But I would say up to this point, up until kind of even though I hated on E-Turn Weezing, it's like an okay deck. And at this event, I think Gujo was like a pretty good play. But I think prior to that, Aiden usually played pretty bad decks like Lost Box, Flying Pikachu, and I don't know. NAIC played Arceus and Teleon Flying Pikachu, so like pretty mid decks. But Aiden, picking up some better decks, seeing some better results. I think Aiden will be like definitely push to be like a constant, big name threat at future tournaments from here on out, as long as they put the Flying Pikachu away.
Just keep the flying Pikachu in the back pocket, bro. That's something you need to tell yourself, though. To be honest, that's all you need to write
I
that
played
one on
at
your
one
mirror.
tournament. Wait, what do you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, you played it at one tournament, but every single tournament, every single meta was like, "Hey, yo, is there a way we can pull back out the flying P?"
Well, I just it's
Or it's
something worth
Arceus
considering. It
Beaverell.
doesn't
It's
mean you
Arceus
should.
Beaverell, right? But
Arceus Bieber. Now there's a deck. That's a combo right there.
yeah,
Let's
do you
take a
get the
look at
Squavette now?
let's
Squavettes,
take a
hold
look at
up.
these two Lugia builds. Trevor Reed and Eric Rodriguez. We'll start with Trevor's. Now, both of them did play the Dura VMAX, which seemed to actually be a more popular inclusion than I realized until after the event. Um, Also, yeah, there's a couple other notable players that I noticed at the event who are also playing the Duraludon VMAX. Some people playing the single strike. Urshifu as well was like another thing. Um, yeah, what do you think about the Duraludon VMAX, Chip?
I mean, I think it makes sense, right? It was pretty obvious going into the tournament. Lugia, as it was built previously, just lost to a Duraludon, right? There was nothing they could do about it. They just lost to a Duraludon. That's
Yep.
something people could easily try to exploit. And Duraludon VMAX just kind of slots in. It can also it just hits through all effects in general. So there's tons of other situations where it can come up. If you go against the mirror and they don't play Duraludon, you just win the mirror by setting up your Duraludon VMAX, right? And it's just overall like it's a strong attacker. It's got a lot of HP. Its ability is really annoying for something like a Mew. Granted, I guess you probably don't really want to use it against Mew. You probably want to just rely on Tyranitar plus Eviltal, right? But
Yeah.
um,
Give it away if
yeah,
you
I
have a
mean,
Mew matchup.
it's probably just got legs in it's just overall pretty solid. It does force you to play more of the impact energies, but I don't think you really mind that too much. I mean, it's really a single strike focused deck, so you don't mind having to commit more single strike energies to your list.
Yeah, it doesn't definitely doesn't hurt too much. You do like lose out on there's no regenerative energy in this build
Yeah.
specifically we see here, which is like whatever, I guess. But it's got the gifts, got the V guard still, which is like the more important of the two kinds of energy, I think, as well. And yeah, with Duraludon being an easy answer or an easy card to set up in the Duraludon or against Lugia, it's also an answer against Duraludons against your Lugia build, right? So it does both things, right? Like, oh, if you're playing against a Lugia player that doesn't play an answer to Duraludon, well, you just win. And if you're
Yeah,
playing up against
insert the
a
Spider-Man meme right
yeah.
here, right?
And if you're playing up against a Duraludon deck that is using Duraludon against your Lugia deck, so that way they can theoretically get an auto win because Lugia usually can't hit through the ability of Duraludon. Well, now you have Duraludon to hit through the ability of Duraludon, right? So it kind of
Yeah.
gives like a safety net. It's like a really powerful attacker, like one hit KO's Goodra, like Goodra. You just auto win now. Basically, you set up your Duraludon, you're like one hit, right?
Yeah.
Um, so it's really good against the Goodra, really good in Mirror, really good as an answer to other Duraludons, really good against Arceus decks. Like, yeah, the Duraludon is pretty sick in there for sure. It might become a staple moving forward, I feel like.
Yeah, I expect to see that be the case. Something else Trevor had in here that a lot of people didn't is the double Luminion. I think Eric also had double Luminion, right? That was something that
Everyone plays double Luminion. That's been a standard that's been standard since day one and
in post rotation. For
yeah.
some reason, for post rotation, I was thinking it was one Luminion in list, but
No.
maybe I might be tripping there.
Everyone's been running the two.
Okay, okay. But the real card that I know for a fact, you can't call me out on this one. People were not running, but it actually seems pretty good. And I like the theory behind it. Is the Thornton, the one of Thornton
Yeah.
in here. Lets you be a little more skimpy on your attackers, and it's also out to something like Mawile, right?
Yep.
It kind of
The Mall
works
while out.
multiple ways.
Yeah, there was a couple players who at the event who were trying to make sure me and my group didn't know they had the Thor. And actually, I think Trevor was maybe part of their group for this tournament. I'm not 100% sure because looks super familiar or super similar to what they were playing. So Trevor might have been working with them. I actually don't know. Um, Nathaniel Kaplan and Noah. I'm not sure if they were working with Trevor or not, but the list looked very similar. But they had the Thorn as well, and they were trying to make sure me and my group didn't know about their Thorn because they knew we were playing them all while, so that they could catch us with us to beat it if we ran into them. And I actually was at the
This
same
is the
record
same
as.
60 as Josh Fernando.
Okay, so no, actually, it could be the exact same. Oh no, so it's not the exact same. So it's pretty close though. It looks very similar. It's very close to theirs. Because they had the Thornton. You could probably find one of them in day two
Yeah,
if you really wanted to. We could
I'll find
compare.
them. Yeah.
So I knew they were working with like a couple other players as well. I know it wasn't just them too, but yeah, the Thorn, yeah, allows you to create more attackers out of nowhere, and then also yeah, doubles as an out to Mawile, which is pretty sick as well. So it gives you all the outs. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
this
That's the other
is
list.
Nathaniel Kaplan, Leo Orozco, and Noah
Right?
Yoshida's day two lists. All played
Yeah.
I think it looks like their difference is they had two Tyrannitars still in addition to the Thornton.
That's the two TR over the Evital. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no evil toll. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And then
yes,
the. I was gonna go
seems good
ahead.
from no, I was gonna say seems good from Trevor, and then also we had the other Lugia list from Eric Rodriguez. Eric's actually a friend of both of ours, so I mean, I was pretty hyped to see Eric in top eight. I'm sure you were as well. He's been playing for a long time. He's a good dude. So yeah, congratulations to Eric on the strong finish. And he and Jose Marrero both played this list. Jose is a really good player, regional champion. They had the 2/2 Duraludon and also had Tower of Darkness in here. So no Mesagoza, which is, I don't know. I mean, Mesagoza is pretty good in your Lugia deck, but
Also, only a 3/2 Lugia.
yeah, that's true as well. That's true as well. I mean, they're kind of maybe just importing from you know what it might be? Jose, I'm gonna go find his deck picture. Jose always plays max rarity cards. Maybe he didn't have time to get the third alternate art. Oh no, he played the full art Lugia V, not even the alternate art. Come on, Jose, bro. We gotta step it up.
Actually, it's funny. I talked to Jose about that before. He just likes to play his favorite art as opposed to the most expensive one. I'm pretty
Ah,
sure. So,
got it.
but it usually ends up being the most expensive one. You can even see he's got the expensive T-Tars in there too.
Yeah.
Jose is always blinging. But yeah, this one feels. I hadn't looked at this list really at all yet. Definitely skimping on some stuff for sure. Tower of Darkness is something that I actually like. When I first like theoried a list of Lugia, I had 4 Tower of Darkness in there. But I didn't ever really test the 4 Tower of Darkness. But I could see that being better than Mesagosa, to be honest. Especially in a build like this where you have so much single strike stuff that will be more excess, right? You'll probably run into situations in matchups where you don't need your T-Tars or your Yveltal or your Duraludons, or
I
your
mean, you got
Impact
2/2
Energy.
Duraludon, right? As
Yeah,
well.
so you
So
have like a lot of extra potential single strike stuff matchup to matchup. So I
the Tower
could
of
see
Darkness
like,
themselves.
yeah, so I could see like a quad Tower of Darkness build potentially being a little bit better. But I think the real thing that it's missing out on is just ways to find your Lugias. Okay, so you have like only a 3/2 Lugia line and then no Mesagoza as well, right?
Yeah, relying on having one
Feels
in
like
the opening hand
feels like
or
Burnett's like this is super heavily reliant on Burnett. That's the way it feels.
to just discard your Archeops. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like you end up going the Burnett route a lot of the time. It's nice when you don't have to, though, right? If you're able to use your Luminion to just go get you a research, it's obviously way better than going to get Burnett. But you can't really do that
Yeah.
if you're, not going to be discarding any Archeops. You got to rely on the safety net of having that Burnett a lot of times. Did have the Regenerative Energy in here. It's a pretty good card against Lost Box, but when I was playing Lugia before the tournament, what I found a lot of times is just like if I was only putting one V star in play and then just attacking with T-Tar, right? And then like I started my Lugia V, then I didn't really get a chance to even use the regenerative energy. So I think it makes sense that people are moving away from it. It does seem good though.
I think as a one of, it's still probably solid. I think it's hard to get value out of more than one of them throughout a game. There might be some matchups that like develop moving forwards where you can like attack with Lugia V and then evolve it to Lugia V Star afterwards. I think that could be a possibility. As of right now, I don't think those matchups really exist too much. So I'd say probably one is okay, but going down to 0 seems fine as well. Which actually I did want to shout one more Lugia list out while we're kind of on the topic of Lugia before we get to that last top 8 list was the Australian list from, or I don't know if it's the Australian list, but Matthew Burris played it. Um, Everyone was talking about capturing aroma versus great ball. Well, Burris played 4 of each. So I just wanted to mention that into as far as another Lugia list go. Another way to look at Lugia, maximizing consistency, it kind of feels like in this build. 4 capture and aroma, 4 great balls, still has the Mesagosas. No regenerative energy as well, and a little bit heavier on the gift energy with 4 of those.
So what's he
And then
not
also full 4
playing?
Lugia. No radiant Pokemon, so no Serena,
Okay.
no Nest Balls.
Yeah. Okay.
Which I don't hate that trade-off of Great Ball for Nest Balls, to be honest, because
Sure. And he's got the
finding the
four
Lugia V is not
four
too hard.
V star as well.
Yep.
So like higher chance that you're gonna see it off of, see something you want off Great Ball, right?
Yeah, but it
Um,
feels like definitely max consistency. I mean, it feels like the gimmicks for Lugia were definitely the bigger deal this tournament than max consistency for sure. So, but another way to look at Lugia, I thought I would bring that up because I thought the list was interesting for sure.
Yeah, I had not seen this one yet, so definitely worth noting. And then the final deck to make top 8, and the biggest surprise is Miraidon, played by Robert Kinbrum. And this list, as well as was super interesting. There's no judge in here, and we've got 3 Cramomatic. Not something
Yeah,
I think I would have predicted going in.
definitely not. Also, an echoing horn. That's actually a pretty interesting inclusion as well. The echoing
Yeah.
horn. The four
4
switch card.
switch
If
carts, yeah.
yeah, it feels like that's for the Lost Box matchup, right? To like put the Cram Sableye combos off getting knockouts and stuff like that. So I feel like that has to be for the Lost Box matchup. Those switch cards in here do, because that's like a lot of switch cards. One escape rope, 4 switch card, and 3 beach court. When you don't even really need to be switching, like retreating is just fine, right? For the most part. That feels like a lot of switch cards.
Yeah.
So yeah, super aggressive build, right? Like, and this is kind of where I was like leaning towards with my Miraidon build as well. Just like I kind of said, fully screw the Lost Box matchup. I feel like the switch cards are in here to give you a chance. But yeah, my list was like starting to develop towards something like this. It wasn't quite as aggressive as this was with the Cramomatics, but like I was a pretty high lightning count at 16. We see them here at 15, and then like just trying to find research turn one and play it. So yeah, super aggressive build, and I think this takes advantage of most decks in the format. I think you just come up a little bit short against the Lost Box decks for the most part. I think Guardy is also still a pretty tough matchup because they can prize trade so favorably. But your goal there is just to try and be aggressive and hope that that kind of is enough to beat the Guardy player overall. But if Guardy sets up, you kind of always lose the prize trade. Is kind of one of the problems with this type of deck. Is like there's a couple matchups in the format, Lost Box and Guardy, where you can't really overcome the prize trade just by being faster than them. So
Yeah. I think the multiple switch cards as well can just be good to attack back-to-back turns with Miraidon, right? Because you can
yeah,
switch into a Lucky and then just retreat, right? Where it's like sometimes it's easier to do that than set up a second attacker, right?
you need
And
four
then
of
it
those,
also
and then
lets you bounce between your Raikos as well in order to
yeah, I
get more
guess.
fleet footeds off. So there, I mean, there's some play there. And in I think Robert was streamed twice in both of those games. He fleet-footed a lot, drew a lot of cards off
I
Raiko.
guess maybe that's the reason for the more than anything is the fleet footed for a card. Maybe that's
I
it. Like
More
plus
cards
one.
is better, right? More
Hey,
cards
plus
is
one.
good.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I could see it. But yeah, yeah. I mean, good combination of both those things, right? Good in the Lost Box matchup. It's good for resetting your Miraidon if you get another attack off. I'm still not really that big of a fan of Miraidon, to be honest, personally. But I think, yeah, an aggressive build like this, I think you're looking pretty good against stuff like Lugia, like Mew, and stuff like Goodra as well. I would imagine their Goodra matchup is like fine as well. So like those kind of decks, I think you're doing pretty good against. But I still think you come up really short up against the Guardian matchup, the Lost Box matchup, stuff like that. So still not a huge fan of Miraidon personally. But I don't know. Maybe I even mentioned on the cast last week. Like, I wouldn't be that surprised if it made a top eight. We do see it making a top eight here, and I think let's take a look at. Actually, I'm curious now. Where was the next best performing Miraidon player?
Oh
71st, I
gosh.
think.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right.
Pretty far down.
Yeah, they definitely there were 5 Miraidon in day 2. One got top 8, and then the rest were 71st through 152nd out of 158. So, Miraidon overall did not have the strongest I don't know. I mean, I think if you get a top 8, it's fair to say the deck had a pretty solid showing, right? Um,
Eh, I wouldn't say so. I would say the player, like
yeah, okay, sure,
I
sure,
would
sure.
the deck didn't have a solid showing. The player and their specific build of the deck had a good showing, right? Like a deck having a good showing
Agreed.
would be like I don't know if any deck had like that big of a standout of a showing at this tournament in general. To be honest, like I'd say maybe Arc Piles would be the standout deck for kind of conversion rate plus how well they did would be the kind of thing to look at. We see like one at 10th from Michael Bergerac, which is the same list as Szymanski, I believe. I actually thought Bergerac was going to be winning this tournament once I figured out what Bergerac was playing, or at least like pushing for cut, because I think Bergerac came in at like 7-1-1 or something like that. So I had a little bit of an advantage on Szymanski. I think Szymanski came in at 6-2-1, so and had to go 6-0 to push for a top eight. Um, yeah, I think that would be like the standout deck. Arc Pile would be the standout decks from the tournament because we also had Braden Elfert at 12th place with a
Yeah.
different take on the deck.
It's so tough. I just pulled up the PokeStats live page for Bergerac. So he came in at 711 and he went uh 411 on the day and didn't make top 8. That's pretty wild. I don't know.
Yeah, need one
Need
more
one
point.
more. So yeah, he was one of the bubble players at 11-2-2 and 35 match points. It's just tough. These
Yeah,
tournaments are so big. Um and
you
then
got to be perfect or almost to push for that top eight, and then to
Josh
even get
Frink as well
further.
was on the same 60 and I believe they finished top 64. Yeah, 48th place.
Yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, Arceus decks in general, Braden Elford as well at 12th place. He played an Arc Flying Pikachu deck. That's a little bit
yeah.
different.
This is kind of what we were testing before the tournament was something very similar to this, and this is because I played against Braden in a game on my stream leading up to the tournament. I was like, it made me think about the deck a little bit more, so we tested out something similar to what Braden actually ended up bringing. And we weren't like blown away by it, so we didn't really put too much more effort into it. But I think there is something there for sure. I think Arceus, and I think I've been saying this like since the format has started. I think Arceus is good. Now, what is best with Arceus might change meta to meta, tournament to tournament, tournament to tournament meta,
And that's
but
the thing that's
Arceus is
so
just super
cool
good right
about
now.
Arceus, right? Like it's colorless, it's just super strong
Yeah.
on its
The biggest
own,
thing
and you can put it with anything.
the biggest thing is your Arceus V just isn't under as much threat as it has been turn two. Like Mew, of course, is probably going to KO your Arceus V turn 2, but you kind of have that matchup cover with Drapion. Lugia is not super consistent at always pulling off a turn 2 attack, and sometimes it has to be with their Lugia, so Gardevoir stops your Arceus V from getting KO'd. And then stuff like Lost Box, sometimes they can get there. Stuff like Gardevoir's not KOing your Arceus V turn 2 very often. Like your Arceus Vs are just like a lot safer than they have been in like the last format. So I think Arceus is in like a pretty good Arceus in general. What you pair it with is going to change, I think. But I think Arceus in general is just in a pretty good spot.
I think the last there's a
Well, hold
okay,
on. We
there
could mention,
two decks we
I
want
think
to talk
we
about. First,
11th. Yes, yeah.
yeah.
Go
First is
ahead.
Tobias with the Intellion Urshifu. We talked about this a little bit last week on the cast. Neither of us is like a super. I don't know. I think we were both
Haven't
like
played with it.
haven't played it much. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think like recognizing like this is a deck that can just make plays. Like this deck can
Cool
do
deck.
so much stuff, right? With the combination of
Mhm.
Alakazam, with the Yoga Loop, with the double gunner. Super cool deck for sure. And I think that maybe the reason, I mean, 11th place is obviously an incredible finish. That's a bubble out of top 8, I believe, or maybe that would have been one of the first 34 pointers from Tobias. But maybe the reason that this deck didn't do better is just people haven't put the time in for it, right? Because I
Yeah.
think like for a deck like this, you got to have the flow chart figured out for every matchup, and the flow. It's not like a deck like sometimes you have to have the flow chart figured out, but the flow chart is pretty similar in a lot of matchups. I think the flow chart is very different matchup to matchup for this deck.
Yeah, and you have like a bunch of stuff. Like you have a 2-1 Drapion line in there. You have the 2-2 Urshifu. Like I don't even know if Urshifu is necessary in some of your matchups. Maybe you
Wow.
always want the threat of the knockouts, but I feel like the deck also just like
Tobias went 5-1 in day 2, by the way.
yeah, and then couldn't
Lost
even
to
push for the top
Robert.
8.
Lost to Robert in round 14. Yeah.
Yeah, and that seems like a tough matchup, right? The
Yeah. Yeah.
even
Yeah.
with the Urshifu stuff, I feel like it's just like a 2 prize trade off, and they're just getting the first 2 prize cards like every time. They're putting a lot of pressure on you very fast. But yeah, I think a deck like this, like, and I feel like this deck, like we kind of talked about the arc anti-meta decks, like you want to be able to know a little bit more what's going on in the meta. Maybe like that's what the Intellion needs a little bit more info on in general, right?
Wow.
Like I feel like you definitely want to take some L's somewhere, like even to Mew and cut the Drapion stuff to be a little bit more consistent.
Robert's other one of Robert took 3 losses. One of them was to Lugia. I mean, you're gonna lose sometimes, right? Even if you think it's a good matchup. And then round 2 lost to a different Miraidon.
Yeah.
So yeah, 2
So even with
Miraidons,
even
2
with the Urshifu,
losses.
right now it's pretty tough. Which makes sense. Like it doesn't matter that you can have the Urshifu for the 1-hit KO. Like they're just hitting so hard so fast. They're still keeping up in the price trade back and forth. So it doesn't matter if you have it.
So
Um
yeah, this deck was really cool. I think we'll see more people spend some time now that there's like a good performing list from
yeah.
an actual major tournament, not just like people playing it online. I think people will start to put more time into this deck, and we could see it. This is something I think we could see more from. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see one of these in top 8 in Portland, to be honest.
Yeah,
Um, and
definitely.
then we got a couple Mewtwo Guardies. You want to say anything about Mewtwo Guardie?
No, I mean, that's what I was just gonna make note. Yeah, Mewtwo Guardy didn't place in top 8. We saw the best performing Guardy just be a straightforward, consistent build of Guardy from Tord. But we saw a couple of Mewtwo's pushing for top 8 overall. We got the Pedro Petrucci, who's been a top performing player from Brazil. I think they got actually
I think he's number 1
confirm.
Brazil right now. Number 1
Yeah,
Latin
got
America.
top 16 at OCIC and then top 8 at Sao Paulo as well.
Yeah.
So has been killing it lately. Um, Played the Mewtwo Guardy, Philip de Sosa,
Yeah.
uh, also with the Mewtwo Guardy. So yeah, still a good deck, still a good way to play the deck. I don't know if it's better than straightforward Guardy. I think your Lost Box matchup you have more options in, but is it worth the consistency trade off? Who knows? But I think yeah, the last deck we probably definitely want to talk about. Let's see what something else was. Of course, Sanders deck.
Yep, that's yeah, wow, it doesn't even fit on the page all at once, but yeah, I mean, this is the guy that everyone's looking at whenever the tournament starts. What is Sander playing? You know he's going to be playing some sort of control deck, and there's a lot of things happening here. A lot of different options, 2 different energy types. There's an Ursa Luna V. I literally went through my bulk today, my bulk Vs, and pulled out some Ursa Luna Vs that I had set aside to just bulk off. I was like, okay, I guess I got to keep this one. Um, yeah, I
In
don't know, a lot
case.
going on. So Azul, you played against
Yeah.
Sander, right?
Yeah, and
So
that was
you
a
got to witness it
pretty
firsthand.
yeah, pretty uneventful matchup for me. The matchup's pretty terrible for Sablezard because your damage cap is so low because they're not drawing prize cards. I think like up against a normal Lost Box build with a Dragonite, it's going to be a little bit closer of a matchup. But well, yeah, when I can only do 12 damage counters with Sableye, it's almost impossible to beat the Penny Crabominable V Mill loop that they can set up. So yeah, the matchup is basically impossible for Sablezard. I don't know how a lot of your other matchups actually play out. But the idea of the deck in general is to abuse Penny. You see, there's 3 Penny in the list. There's a Team Yell's Cheer in the list. There's 3 Palpad. Penny lets you pick up a basic Pokemon. So the idea is you put something in the active that is annoying for your opponent to deal with. In this case, for me, it was literally anything that had more than 12 HP. And then next turn, you can Penny it up after they hit it and send up something else. So one of the combos like that, what Santa was basically doing against me was like leave Ursaluna V in the active. I'd hit it, then pick up the Ursaluna V, or Ursaluna V, set up the Crabominable, mill 2 cards, repeat, right? Something you can do kind of in general if you need to take knockouts, though, is you have the Mimikyu V in there with the ability Dummy Doll, which is when you put it into play, it can't be hit by any damage from your opponent's attacks by anything. Nothing can hit Mimikyu V. So you put Mimikyu V in play as your only Pokemon. You Penny whatever your active is, you send up the Mimikyu V, you attack, and you put 3 damage counters on their Pokemon for how many prize cards they've drawn. So if they've drawn 5 prize cards, you're doing, 150 damage? And then they can't do anything, and then you bench it on the Mimikyu, and then you Penny it up, and you repeat, and then you Palpad 2 Penny back into your deck, and you just keep going until you draw your 6 prize cards, right? So it's got the Shadow Rider V in there for the Mew matchup. You got the Mawile in there for trapping stuff like Luminions in the Lugia matchup. And then you have Cry of Destruction as well, actually, is like kind of a big key to your Lugia matchup as well. Lugia deck is a lot more fragile to Yveltal now. So if you have like a Lugia in your active or something, and then you Yveltal the energy off it, I mean, they can't really attack with the Lugia again. You have a little bit more recovery with your single strike attackers, but not even that much. Like Yveltal is just like really, really good against Lugia now. So and you can end up like Mawile trapping pretty much anything in that deck. It doesn't even have to be like a Luminion or like the Serena. If they just like, you could even trap Archeops. Like one of the plays you can actually do in like the Sablezard with the Mawile is you can like towards the end of the game, you can like trap an Archeops with Mawile, and then they put 3 energy on that Archeops and knock you out. And then you just like claw the Mawile back, double cross switcher up the other Archeops, and then trap that. And then they don't have enough energy to attack with that Archeops. So you can do something similar in this, but you remove the energy with the Yveltal. So yeah, it's a really cool deck. It's got a lot of weird win conditions, but the core of the deck is kind of a penny loop between Pokemon.
Yep.
I guess with the Pot Helmet plus V-Guard energy, Abominable can't be KO'd by Dragonite, right?
Oh yeah.
Wait, can Pot
Yeah.
Helmet be put on a V Pokemon?
It, no, it
Oh,
can't. It can't. It
so I
it
guess you could
can't.
use
It can
Ursaluna.
be, but it can't be. It's what's it called?
You do Ursaluna plus V-Guard energy, and I think I was theorizing one of
You don't
the
even
win
need V-Guard
conditions.
energy, bro. This thing has 260
Oh
effectively.
yeah, I was theorizing that the win condition for Sander up against Lost Box because of the Dragonite was probably just send up Ursaluna, they hit it, and then what you do is you just penny Ursaluna enough times that Sander would actually knock out their whole own bench with Dragonite, which I think is definitely reasonable. So that was my
Yeah.
theory as to Sander's win condition against Dragonite Lost Box. That was probably the win condition is you just send up Ursaluna, and eventually the Dragonite KOs your own bench before you run out of like the penny loop, because the penny loop also isn't infinite. It's infinite against like a deck like mine because I'm not actually putting enough pressure to threaten KOs.
Yeah.
Because I can't even KO Regieleki. So you can set up the Regieleki, recover a Palpad, Palpad recovers 2 penny, repeat. So yeah, the deck's super cool, and I think definitely could be something we see more people pick up moving forward because it seems like it's not super gimmicky based on your opponent not playing a certain out. It just seems like it's a pretty strong deck in general. I'm actually curious. Could you pull up the live for Sander? I'm actually
Yeah.
curious to what Sander actually even lost to.
Sander lost to Robert, the Maridon player, lost to
Okay.
a Tina, and then lost to Oscar Rivera's playing a Lost Box deck. Looks like with Galarian
Larian
Moltres.
Moltres.
That doesn't do
And
anything. No,
what's the other upside down
there's no
card?
Dragonite. This is a Halucha.
Oh, I guess
So
maybe the
there's
Snorlax puts on enough pressure. I don't think so
yeah.
though. The
Yeah, that's
horn could
kind of
have caught him, I
interesting.
guess, as well.
Yeah,
Maybe he just had a bad
surprise
draw.
horn.
Yeah, that's what I was trying. That's how I was trying to beat Sander. Was trying to hold my horn for
Well, he
long
played
enough.
you right after this guy, so he was probably
Yeah,
well aware. He was like, "I'm not losing to another horn."
yeah. Just assume it. If he got surprised by horn last round, assume they have a horn this round.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was probably a 1-0 though, so it was like probably Oscar maybe squeaked out a game because that definitely doesn't seem like this seems like it'd be tough. Maybe I just don't know how to play the matchup, and there's like some other key to the matchup I didn't pick up on, but it felt pretty impossible.
Yeah, he did beat another Sablezard that he played. He beat a Dragonite in round 3. This guy made day
Mhm.
2, Maro Wandolph. beat
Guardi.
had a couple ties, yeah, with the Urshifu deck as well.
Yeah, Lost Zone Tina seems like a bad matchup. I don't think you're being Lost Zone Tina.
Yeah, and
I
then
think
lost to probably just the aggression of
Miraidon, yeah.
the Miraidon.
Yeah, and doesn't have it. Yeah, that damage is so high from Miraidon, and the Miltank's not saving you. Waiting for the Mimikyu. I bet Sander was hoping that the Mimikyu would be out
Yeah,
a
I did
tournament
wanna point
sooner.
out, I mean, you mentioned the core of the deck here is Penny, Loop, Mimikyu V being one of those options, and when Penny got revealed back in December, the very first thing Sander tweeted, Mimikyu V's best friend. So back in December, like, and he did the same thing back whenever, what was it that let Eldegoss go infinite? Was it Double Turbo Energy? I guess whenever Double Turbo Energy got printed, he tweeted about Double Turbo Eldegoss loop, um, and then ended up playing it. Right, so like Sander does not hide his thoughts. He's putting it out there on Twitter what he's thinking is good. Um, as soon as cards are revealed, right? And even here, right? This is a Japanese account that Sander retweeted showing just a Mimikyu Penny and then 4 Pal Pads. One other thing I'll note as well is this control deck does not have like a perfect infinite, but it's pretty much the same infinite as his Mewtwo V Union deck from NAIC, right? Where you have Pal Pad, Silene, and Team Yell's Cheer. And the combination of those things, especially with this list having 3 Pal Pad in it, is theoretically like you have to flip an absurd amount of double tails for that to not let you remain infinite, right? And even if you did flip a bunch of double tails, you could even sneak in the Regieleki if you needed to.
Yeah, it's not infinite, but you have enough resources to like win your matchups. I think. Yeah, I'm curious as to why this is Sanders' reason for playing Crushing Hammers previously was like, well, if I play one, they might think I play more, which is fair.
But people
But
know
like
now.
this deck is not very good at infiniting Crushing Hammers. So I wonder if there was like a specific energy that Sander felt like they had to remove to win a matchup, or if it was the same theory of, oh, because I'm Sander, if I play one Crushing Hammer or two, they'll think I have four, which is
Maybe it's
possible.
for the Shadow Rider
But
against Mew potentially, but then I guess you would maybe just play Fan of Waves instead.
yeah, then you just like do fan. So that's curious. I feel like Yveltal already sets you up for the Shadow Rider play, right? You go Yveltal into Flannery plus Shadow Rider.
Yeah,
But that matchup does seem tough though, because Mew's judging you every turn. That does seem tough. But I guess you just try and get there. You have the
yeah.
Curlias you can set up to have some draw engine, some like recovery under the judges.
So yeah, super interesting one there from Sander, and that is,
As
geez,
always.
an hour and 20 minutes of the first section of the podcast.
Well, that guy, I didn't even realize we've been talking that long. Talking about new Pokemon decks is fun. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, when we were talking about what we are gonna talk about this week, Azul is like, "Yeah, I mean, we don't have to spend too much time on a UIC." I was like, "Dude, we're gonna talk about this for a long time."
Didn't even realize how much time. All right, well, let's move on. Or you go ahead and take it from
Yep.
here, Chip.
Yep. So we're gonna move on to the next segment of our podcast. But before we do that, we do want to give a big thanks to our sponsor, Dragon Shield, for supporting the Uncommon Energy podcast. Dragon Shield makes tons of trading card game and just other various tabletop gaming products. Our favorite product, something that we constantly use all the time, is the sleeves. They definitely make the best card sleeves in the business. Azul and I both exclusively use Dragon Shield sleeves when we play in tournaments. I use also a Dragon Shield. I've got a Magic Carpet, which is the setup that lets you store a bunch of cards in it. And that's what I use to store my cube. I use the Dragon Shield cube shells as well. Tons of great things for Dragon Shield. They make binders as well to store your cards. And yeah, they're products that Azul and I have both used constantly. And we are big fans of them and very thankful that they are wanting to support the Uncommon Energy podcast.
Yeah, huge shout out to him as always. I actually was rocking the blood red matte sleeves for EUIC. Those are my favorite. My favorite are the mattes. I definitely like switching up the colors, but yeah, I was rocking the blood red matte sleeves for EUIC, and yeah, they worked great as always. No problems. I got deck checked. No issues with my sleeves. Yeah, that's it. They're always high quality sleeves, and can always rely on them to take me through a tournament without any fuss.
Yeah, I've used those blood reds before. Actually, I'm a big fan of that color. It's like a deep dark red color.
Yeah.
I like it. Well,
All
cool.
right.
Shout outs to Dragon Shield as always for supporting the cast. If you want to check out Dragon Shield, you can find their products at most local retailers. I've seen them at Targets and Walmarts and stuff like that. You
Yeah,
can
pretty
also
much
check out
anywhere.
your local game stores will definitely be carrying them because they're the best in the business. And you can also check out Dragon Shield's web shop online. great place to buy cards as well. Not cards, excuse me. Sleeves, card
Products.
sleeves, and tons of other gaming products. Thanks again, Dragon Shield.
I'm gonna move on to guess that flavor text. It is my turn. I feel like for some reason I feel like I've picked or you've picked 2 weeks in a row, but I don't. I think that's wrong. I just haven't remembered the other ones. But it is my turn to pick this week. Guess that flavor text is where one of us picks a card and then reads the flavor text on that card to the other host, and then that host has to guess which Pokemon the card and the flavor text belongs to. Gets it right without using any lifelines. You get 4 points for each lifeline you use. You get -1 point. The lifelines are what set the card is from, what stage the card is, and read an attack name off the card. Chip, are you ready?
I am ready. Let's do it, Azul.
All right. They diligently serve people and Pokemon so they can gather feelings of gratitude. The females are particularly good at babysitting.
Okay, when you say gratitude, my first thought is shaman, but this is not shaman. Um, they serve. Oh, it's a Pokemon that's male and female splits. They have different attributes. I think I know what this is. Let me have you read it one more time.
They diligently serve people and Pokemon so they can gather feelings of gratitude. The females are particularly good at babysitting.
Particularly good at babysitting. So I want to say this is Indeedee. I think this might be Indeedee. Um, but I don't think that is Indeedee specifically good at babysitting. The fact that it mentions babysitting specifically is a little interesting. I could just spike the 4 pointer here, which would be pretty strong. I don't know what else this could be, and I feel pretty decent about guessing Indeedee. It would be pretty nice to just spike 4 points, but I could whittle it down a little bit more. Nah, we're spiking it. Yeah, come on, let's go. Indeedee. Is it Indeedee, Azul?
Yes, it
Let's
is.
go.
Oh
4
my
points.
gosh.
4 points. Has that ever happened? Has either of us ever gotten
No.
4 points?
No, before I didn't think so. I was like, at first I read it, I was like, I feel like Chip might be able to get some pretty easy. And I read it again, I was like, he'll probably if he gets it, he'll probably have to go through a few. And I thought if you asked the set, you maybe would not get it anymore. The set is Fusion Strike. So I was like, if he asks the set, maybe that would throw him
What
off.
Indeedee is Infusion Strike? Is it the one that
This is
like?
Psychic One with Call for Family. It's like not a
Oh,
DD. It's
okay,
not a
okay.
real DD.
Not the one that like does more damage for each card in your hand.
No, that one could be in the set. I don't know if that one's in the set
I
as
think
well.
that's in
But
Shining Fates, actually.
yeah, so I was like hoping you. I was like, I don't think he'll get it initially, but
Dude, you're right though. If I had asked what set it was, I would have probably gotten thrown for a loop. I probably would have still come back to Indeedee, but it would have made me
yeah,
think a lot more because I would have not thought
there's Indeedee in the set.
yeah, that I mean it's good like you said, it's not a memorable one. Well, let's
Yeah.
go, bro. 4
Well,
points? It's gonna take you a freaking year to catch
I
up
know.
now.
We were tied before this week. We were tied, and now I guess Chip is up 4. So yeah, I got a lot of ground to make up, but hopefully I'll be able to pull it back next week.
No shot, kid. I guess I'll have to give you a couple of layups now. Give you a chance to come back.
Reasonable.
All
There's been a
right.
couple that I should have had, like the Ice Cube, and there was like another one I should have had, Darumaka.
I have given you several
Yeah,
gimmies.
yeah.
No, you got the Darumaka, even though you said the name wrong. We gave you the
Eventually.
points.
Yeah, I knew the Pokemon. Just didn't know how to pronounce
Mhm.
his name.
All right. Well, let's move on. This is a topic that really has kind of blown up on Pokemon Twitter the last few weeks, and not last few weeks, last few days. And it's not really even something that necessarily has anything to do with playing the game, but it's kind of just something that involved the Pokemon card world. So it affects collectors, players, theoretically. And it's kind of just something crazy that happened. So this post blew up on Reddit over the weekend and just says saw this in a Facebook group. Alleged printing company worker stole hits off the line and tried to offload them to an LGS. And the picture is just ridiculous. It is a table with hundreds, I mean, thousands probably of secret rare cards from Fusion Strike specifically. We see the alternate art Espeon, the alternate art Mew, Gengar, Intellium VMAXs, variety of each of the different rainbow rares, the gold training courts. I mean, Azul, I mean, just looking at this picture in and of itself is pretty wild.
Yeah, like looking at it initially, you're like, oh, they're just like kind of stacks of rare cards or like alternate arts. But then when you think about it, when you actually think about it, that stack is just only that It's only that
I
rare,
mean, this is
that
like
alternate
1,000
art.
Espeon VMAXs, or like
Yeah,
it's probably close to 1,000. I don't know. I mean, how big do you think each of these stacks are? Probably
it's a lot.
like 300, 400 ish, something like that.
It's more than 3 or 400. I don't know. I'd have to, like, look at an actual stack of cards, but it's a
Think
lot.
about an actual stack. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of cards. It's kinda ridiculous. The biggest thing I think would be how stupid do you have to be to bring it into a local game store? Or it's like to give a little bit of comparison again, it's like these stacks of cards don't even exist when like local game stores, get all their product from the distributor and open it all up. They don't even have close to this.
I mean,
Not even
how many
remotely close
packs would you have to open to get that?
to get
I mean,
to get
someone
that
could
many
probably
Espeons.
count it out and figure out how many cards are here on the table. I mean, we see boxes of cards that, are not even have cards pulled out necessarily
Yeah.
yet. I mean, this has got to be it might be 10,000 cards sitting here on this table. Like, I don't think that's a
Yeah, that's a
ridiculous
lot.
thing. And if the pull rates of a secret rare, I think is like max one per box, it's probably more like one per every other box, something like that. One per 50 packs or so. I mean, that's a lot. So, I mean, this story blew up partially just because of how ridiculous the picture is, I think, but also a lot of people seem to think that Fusion Strike had really bad pull rates and somehow think that the fact that this many secret rare cards were missing from circulation like affected the pull rates of the set overall. And my first reaction to that was like, dude, they make so many cards. There's just no way that this would ever have an impact on that. But I mean, the more you look at this picture, I mean, this is a lot of cards sitting here. But I think when you kind of think about how cards are actually packaged, which we'll talk about in a minute, it's pretty unlikely and I would say almost impossible that this actually had an impact on pull rates. But it does make you scratch your head for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely didn't have an effect on players with like how the car, with how the packs are packaged and then put into booster boxes. It doesn't seem like it should have a effect on any of the pull rate stuff. But yeah, it's actually like yeah, it's a ridiculous one. I mean, how could they even get away with that? That feels like a security breach at the facilities.
Yep. And well, they fun fact did not get away with it. So a follow up
But they
to
got
this
close.
story,
No,
yeah,
but they
they got
only didn't get away
close.
with it because they went to go sell it to a local game store, right? Like that's the only reason, right?
Yeah. So this
There had to be
post,
like you have to be so stupid if you end up in that position and you're gonna do this and you go through all the if you're able to get that many cards out of the facility, how are you not smarter with how you get rid of them? Like I
yeah.
don't
So
that just
apparently
seems so
they
stupid.
exchanged hands several times for I
Okay,
think
okay.
as well is what some of these
So they
posts
were
are
the
saying.
the
So
initial person was pretty smart then. They got it out,
well,
they got rid of them.
I think it came back to them though
Oh,
is the issue there. And that's the problem is that this, typically leaves a trail, right?
yeah.
But yeah, so there's an update. So this post initially the first pick blew up said saw this in a local Facebook group and then so the store who this picture was taken at, they ended up making a statement in the Facebook group as well. Posted and said, many of you have recently heard the story involving stolen Fusion Strike hits and Trading Card World, which is the name of the store. I believe it is in Texas. Although the release of this information is unfortunate, the truth of the subject is as follows. TCW, the card shop, was approached by an individual inquiring if we were interested in purchasing hits from the set. We reviewed the pics from the seller and advised that they were either fake or stolen. Realizing the amount of packs that it would have required to obtain that quantity of hits, it seemed clear that one or the other was true. And like I said, I mean, it's probably like 50,000 packs would have needed to have been
Yeah, a
opened
lot.
to get this many cards. And that's like a stupid amount of packs. Okay. The seller explained his connection to the source, and TCW immediately contacted the Pokemon Corporation through proper channels. The information was sent up the corporate ladder given the seriousness of the situation. A high ranking Pokemon official contacted the card shop. Pokemon and TCW worked together to successfully retrieve and return the cards. So I imagine they probably told the person, yeah, we'll buy them and sent them out to the shop, and then Pokemon recovered them, right? And then Pokemon acknowledged uh, Trading Card World for their critical contribution to the recovery of these stolen items. It was the largest return of stolen property to date. Trading Card
Wait,
World
for
would
Pokemon or in general?
for
Oh,
Pokemon.
can it be in general? Yeah, okay. I was like, yeah. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
what? I was
for
like, what that
Pokemon.
much? Was it that many cars? Holy moly!
Trading Card World was asked to keep this information confidential while an active investigation was underway. With respect to that request, TCW has kept this story and their important involvement out of the spotlight. Hope you all can appreciate the sensational aspect of the story and help to keep the facts straight while publicity seekers look to gain attention with misleading information. Hopefully, we don't fall into that category.
Oh, no, but is that why it was released now then? Is because they were under investigation and now it's over?
I do. So there's a Poke Beach article that has a little bit more information about it, right? And I'm pretty sure that they wrote in here that I'll see if I can find it. Cards seem to have been stolen. And we'll talk about this too. So, I mean, cards being stolen from the factory is something that has been a big problem for the Pokemon Company for the last couple of years. As like the general hype around Pokemon increased, right? More people were interested in it. Cards started to be worth more money. I mean, we've seen pictures of stolen cards surfacing online much earlier than before the set comes out. Like I remember seeing this picture of this Charizard VMAX that they linked here on Pokemon on Poke Beach, the shiny Charizard VMAX from Shining Fates. I remember seeing this picture like 2 months before it was ever officially revealed, even in Japan, to
Yeah,
exist. Right, like it was a problem for a while. Cards were making their way out of the facility at kind of an alarming rate, almost. It seems like.
definitely. And then I think one thing that they've been doing to try and correct that, right, is haven't they, I was
What's up?
distracted for a second. Nothing.
Are you trying to read this or?
I was trying to read it on through your thing, and I should have just been trying to read it on my monitor. I was trying to read it through the screen share.
Yeah.
Ahem.
So yeah, and one thing, this is actually something I think could be possible. So yeah, this picture says this picture. Yeah, so the data from the Poke Beach article says the photo leaked from an internal investigation that started in September 2021 and concluded in January 2022. So it does
Okay.
say the investigation is
Been like over for a
complete.
year. Over a
What's
year now. It's
interesting
been over.
too, as well, is if the investigation started in September of 2021, I'm pretty sure Fusion Strike came out after that. Yeah, Fusion Strike came out
Um.
November 12th, 2021. So
Yeah.
the person got their hands on the cards and tried to sell them to the store before the set even officially came out.
Oh yeah. That's actually a huge.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
that's what I'm assuming this means, right? If the
Well, yeah. If the
investigation.
investigation started in 2021, then it makes sense that they would have been trying to sell them the cards before September. Yeah. The cards weren't even out yet.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that has to have rung a lot of alarm bells for the card shop. So, I mean, I think one thing as well, we should definitely give big kudos to the card shop for doing the right thing, right, and reaching out to Pokemon. I mean, they probably could have gotten a great deal on this lot of cards since they're,
Yeah.
stolen. They could have tried to sell them over time online and probably made a lot of money, but they did the right thing, reached out to Pokemon and got it taken care of. But yeah, one thing that this kind of has made me wonder. So, I mean, this was a problem for a long time, right? Like cards were getting out of the factory way earlier than they should have been. Um, and if you remember, Pokemon actually bought the printing company Millennium Print Group,
Yeah.
which, fun fact, is like in the same city I live in. Like it's like, of the whole country. It's just funny that where the cards are made is like 20 minutes from my house. Um, but the what was I saying? Oh yeah, so Pokemon bought the printing company, right? And it makes me
Yeah.
wonder if Pokemon buying the printing company had anything to do with all of these leaks, right? Was there just
Yeah.
too much stuff getting out that Pokemon was like, all right, we're stepping in, we're buying this company, and we're gonna handle the management and like the security, and we're gonna make sure that this stuff stops happening.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty silly that Pokemon doesn't already own the the company that prints their cards to begin with. Like that seems kind of ridiculous to me. To begin with, that wasn't already a thing. But I mean, I guess now they do. But yeah, I don't know. I guess
Well, I mean, think about
Pokemon
it
just
like
seems
this.
to.
Think about this, Azul. So you are a corporation in the early 2000s that's tasked with
Well,
bringing
yeah. Well, not
this
initially, but like when did they just buy it? When did they buy?
this year in
Oh yeah. See
2022.
that. Yeah, they definitely could have like bought like 2018 or something. They probably should have bought when Pokemon's been big for a while. I think they
Sure.
could have afforded it for a pretty long time.
Yeah,
Just
but
try to,
maybe
and that might
maybe
be.
there had to be, like, a problem to happen for them to, like, justify actually buying it. I mean, because like,
I
sure,
mean,
they can
that was
they
the
can
catalyst probably for the decision in the end, but it doesn't mean it could have been done
this is
ahead
all
of time.
speculation, by the way, Azul, and I don't know any of this for sure, but yeah, I mean,
Definitely seems like that
the
was probably one of the
timelines kind of
reasons.
match up here almost,
Yeah,
right?
of
Um,
them getting all their UV maxes stolen and then leading to owning the company that the UV maxes got stolen from.
so something else that PokeBeach pointed out here is in a video that Pokemon put out last year as well, detailing kind of the process of how cards are made at Millennium Print Group. Um, you see employees putting these cards into these long white boxes and stored in cardboard boxes off to the side until they are going to be sorted into packs. And so that's why, and that's kind of what PokeBeach here points out is that this is why it's very unlikely, and if not almost impossible, that any of like these cards being stolen did not affect pull rates, right?
Yeah, definitely not.
Because of the way that cards are sorted into packs, right? Because they're put on the assembly line, they're randomly put into the packs, per the ratio that whatever they set it at for this type of card, this classification of card, obviously all the secret rares. Um, and you can see the white boxes in the video. It looks like the same, little white long trays. It looks like
Well,
the
not
same
really,
trays that are
because
on
they're the
this table.
same. They're the different. They're put in different on the different side though. I don't think they're the same at all.
Well, they're putting them sideways here, but like in this picture right here, they're
You
standing up,
couldn't.
but you can see that there's space on the side. So it might have been like
No, no shot.
you don't think it's the
No,
same?
no, they're
Okay.
not the same. Because you can even see in the video right there. Like, look at the picture you
Yeah,
pulled
they're
up right there.
long
You see the
ways. Yeah.
box. You can see the box on the in the gaps, but there's not enough room for there to cards to be put long ways.
No, you're right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely don't think it affected the hit ratio at all. Because like, yeah, if you're putting a ultra rare or whatever alternate art every 10 packs or whatever, let's say you're still putting an alternate art every 10 packs. Unless it would have been different if it was all automated and it's like it's just taking. Yeah, even then it would be weird that it wouldn't ever work out. So yeah, I don't think it's ever affected the hit rate. It doesn't make sense for it to logistically, unless they got to a point where they're like, well, we're out of alternate arts. It's like, okay, we'll give them another comment or something. That'd be the only thing that would make sense. It's like, well, because they missed a shipment of alternate arts because they all got stolen. Then they were like, all right, just put a Pikachu in there or something. But yeah, I don't think it probably did not affect the hit rates. But you said some people were speculating that, right? Because it did seem at the time when Fusion Strike came out, you said that
Yeah.
people were sus on the pull
Yeah,
rates of
but that
stuff.
I don't know. I mean, that's just stuff like people buy one booster box and get sad that they don't hit the alternate
Yeah.
art SB on VMAX, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't think that I did see people talking about no one like on Twitter a lot. People were like, "Oh, no wonder the hit rates were so bad for Fusion Strike." Right? This is where all
Yeah.
this alternate arts and secret rares were. And also another thing I've seen people talk about is like we don't know if these could possibly be um, like quality control defect pulls, right? Like if there's something wrong with some of these cards, none of them look like there's anything messed up to me, right? So
Yeah. They look fine.
I don't know that is another just like possibility, right? I mean, that's the thing is like there's so many unknowns in this situation. So much of what we would say is just pure speculation. But I mean, it's just such an interesting thing, and it's been such a big deal the last over the course of the weekend. We definitely just wanted to bring it up and talk about it for a minute.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's gonna do it for this week's episode then. Yeah, interesting stolen Pokemon cards. EUIC is done. We don't have another major tournament for a couple weeks now. I think the next major tournament is Portland, which is in 3 weekends. So we got some time off, which I'm personally very thankful for because I've been traveling a lot lately. Unless you have something else you want to mention, Chip, send us home.
Nope. Yeah. Thanks a bunch to everyone for listening. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave us a rating, a review here on your favorite podcasting platform or drop us a comment, a like over on the YouTube channel. Those things are free. They take just a second and they help us out a ton. Also, once again, big thanks to Dragon Shield for sponsoring the Uncommon Energy podcast. We're super thankful for our partnership with Dragon Shield. Looking forward to working with them. And like we said, they make the best stuff in the game. Go check them out. If you want to check us out and follow along with us, the best place to do that is over on Twitter. You can follow myself at Chip Ritchie. Azul is at Azul_GG. And you can follow the podcast at uncommon_energy.
Yep. Appreciate the support as always. Catch y'all next week, Tuesday at 7 a.m. Eastern. Peace.